Today, we are going to look at the most dumb animal attacks ever recorded. From a spearfisher who turned himself into bait, to a sanctuary visitor who learned that barriers can fail. It was June 15th, 2021, in a quiet, suburban neighborhood in central Florida, where a retention pond bordered a newly developed housing community. The man-made water feature, designed to manage stormwater runoff, had become an unofficial gathering spot for residents, despite the clearly posted "Do Not Feed" wildlife signs around its perimeter. The pond's calm surface reflected the evening sky, while manicured grass slopes provided easy access to the water's edge. Spanish moss draped from nearby oak trees, creating an almost picturesque setting that masked the lurking danger beneath the surface. Megan Holt, a 23-year-old retail associate, had arrived at the pond with two friends for what had become their regular evening hangout. Her companion, a 24-year-old co-worker known for seeking attention on social media, had been encouraging increasingly bold content for their online posts. The third member of their group, a 26-year-old delivery driver, had a history of impulsive decisions and had been feeding the pond's resident alligator scraps of food on previous visits. Their routine had conditioned the large reptile to associate human presence at the water's edge with an easy meal. The warm June evening had drawn several other residents to the area, creating a false sense of security through numbers. As the trio approached the pond that evening, a 58-year-old handyman walking his dog had noticed their intentions and warned them about the posted signs. His cautious nature and years of living in Florida had taught him to respect the dangerous wildlife that inhabited even suburban water features. However, his warnings went unheeded as the group focused on capturing the perfect shot for social media. The setting sun cast long shadows across the water, making it difficult to spot movement beneath the surface. American alligators are apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. These powerful reptiles can grow up to 14 feet. Alligators are ambush predators, capable of explosive bursts of speed from a stationary position. They typically hunt by remaining motionless just below the water's surface, with only their eyes and nostrils exposed, before launching themselves at prey with lightning-fast precision. Their muscular tails provide tremendous propulsion, allowing explosive short-distance lunges in water over 3 to 6 feet, rather than sustained high-speed acceleration. The attack unfolded with terrifying speed. Megan had crouched at the water's edge, positioning herself within 3 feet of the surface while extending food over the pond. The large male alligator, measuring approximately 10 feet in length, had been holding just beneath the surface with only its eyes and nostrils visible. In a single explosive movement, the reptile surged forward, covering the final 3 feet in an instant. Its massive jaws clamped down on Megan's extended forearm with crushing force, the serrated teeth penetrating deep into muscle and bone. The initial bite displaced Megan's center of gravity, pulling her off balance and into the water. The alligator immediately initiated its signature death roll, a violent rotational movement designed to disorient prey and cause massive tissue damage. The spinning motion tore through tendons, muscles, and blood vessels in her arm while simultaneously dragging her beneath the surface. The force of the roll caused severe trauma to her shoulder joint and upper arm, with bone fractures audible above the water's surface. As Megan struggled against the reptile's grip, the alligator maintained its hold and moved several feet from shore into deeper water. The death roll continued intermittently, each rotation causing additional damage to her already mangled limb. Blood clouded the water around them as the alligator's teeth severed major blood vessels. The combination of severe blood loss, shock, and inability to maintain her position at the surface quickly overwhelmed her. Within minutes, Megan lost consciousness and drowned, her body going limp in the predator's jaws. The alligator maintained its hold and remained in deeper water for several minutes, a typical attempt to submerge and cache large prey. As residents gathered and first responders began approaching the shoreline, the disturbance caused the reptile to release its grip and retreat a short distance, remaining in the area rather than fleeing completely. FWC officers had to neutralize the animal before divers could safely enter the water to recover the body. The incident prompted an immediate investigation by the Florida Fish Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, focusing on the repeated feeding that had conditioned the alligator's behavior. The housing development implemented additional safety measures, including higher fencing and increased signage. Megan's family released a brief statement urging others to respect wildlife safety guidelines and avoid feeding wild animals. Local news coverage sparked debates about urban development near natural habitats and the responsibility of communities to educate residents about wildlife danger. It was August 22, 2020, in the murky waters of a Gulf Coast inlet channel where the outgoing tide created perfect conditions for spearfishing. The channel mouth connected a series of backwater bays to the open Gulf, creating a natural funnel where baitfish congregated and predators followed. Visibility in the brackish water rarely exceeded 20 feet, and the strong tidal current carried scents far downstream along the underwater drop-off that marked deeper water. The late afternoon sun penetrated only the surface layers, leaving the depths shrouded in an ominous green darkness. Tyler Garrison, a 28-year-old construction worker, had planned this spearfishing trip with his dive buddy, a 31-year-old carpenter known for his overconfident approach to underwater hunting. The carpenter had suggested this particular spot, claiming it held larger fish than their usual locations and boasting about previous successful hunts in these treacherous waters. Their boat operator, a 44-year-old handyman with years of local knowledge, had anchored near the channel mouth and warned them about the strong current and limited visibility. A shore angler fishing from the nearby jetty rocks had noticed unusual baitfish activity, with schools scattering erratically near the drop-off, a telltale sign that larger predators were already in the area. Tyler entered the water carrying his spear gun and a metal stringer, which he clipped directly to his weight belt instead of using the recommended float system that would tow his catch safely behind him. This decision would prove fatal, as the stringer kept any speared fish directly against his body, where blood and scent would create an irresistible attraction for the channel's apex predators. The ebbing tide was already pushing a scent trail downstream along the very edge where bull sharks typically patrol during feeding hours. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous predators in coastal waters, capable of thriving in both saltwater and brackish environments. These powerful hunters can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with a powerful bite capable of severing flesh and bone. Unlike many shark species, bull sharks are highly aggressive and territorial, often investigating disturbances with direct, purposeful approaches. Their ability to hunt in shallow, murky water makes them particularly dangerous to divers and swimmers. Bull sharks rely heavily on their acute sense of smell, capable of detecting very low concentrations in flowing water. Their stocky build and powerful tail provide explosive acceleration, allowing them to close distances with frightening speed. The attack began as Tyler swam toward a shallow sandbar with 3 freshly speared fish bleeding from the stringer at his hip. A large bull shark, measuring approximately 9 feet in length, had been patrolling the drop-off when the scent trail reached its sensitive olfactory system. The shark approached with the characteristic behavior of its species, making short, direct passes to assess the source of the blood. Each pass brought the predator closer as it homed in on the strongest concentration of scent. The first contact came as a fast bump against the dangling fish mass. Tyler felt the impact, but continued swimming toward the sandbar, unaware that the shark was circling tighter with each pass. The predator returned within seconds, this time committing to a full attack. Its powerful jaws clamped down across the stringer, catching both the bleeding fish and Tyler's outer thigh in a devastating bite. The shark's serrated teeth, designed for cutting through flesh and bone, penetrated deep into the muscle tissue of Tyler's leg. The initial bite severed several major blood vessels, including branches of the femoral artery. The shark shook its head laterally with tremendous force, a behavior designed to tear away chunks of flesh from large prey. This violent shaking motion caused massive tissue damage and freed most of the fish from the stringer, but the predator maintained its grip on Tyler's leg. Blood immediately began pouring from the wound, creating an expanding crimson cloud in the water. water. The shark released its hold and veered away, but the scent of fresh human blood triggered an immediate return. The second attack came higher on Tyler's inner thigh, where the shark's teeth found the femoral artery itself. The bite crushed muscle, severed the major blood vessel, and caused catastrophic hemorrhaging. Tyler's body went into shock as blood loss reached critical levels. The warm Gulf water around him turned red as his life drained away through the massive wounds. His ability to swim effectively disappeared within moments as weakness overcame him. The shark, having inflicted the fatal damage, disappeared into the murky depths without making further contact. The boat operator spotted the blood in the water and immediately moved to Tyler's location, but the damage was already irreversible. Despite rapid transport to shore and emergency medical response, Tyler succumbed to massive blood loss before reaching the hospital. The attack had lasted less than 2 minutes, but the bull shark's precision in targeting major blood vessels made survival impossible. The incident prompted a review of spearfishing safety protocols by local dive operators, with emphasis on proper stringer techniques and buddy system procedures. Tyler's family issued a statement calling for better education about shark safety in Gulf waters. The attack highlighted the particular dangers of spearfishing in low-visibility environments where predators can approach undetected. It was November 8, 2019, at a private roadside animal facility nestled in the rural hills of Southeast Asia, where exotic cats were kept in aging enclosures for tourist viewing. The facility operated with minimal oversight, relying on entrance fees from backpackers seeking close encounters with dangerous wildlife. After-hours access was poorly controlled, with low public barriers and inadequate lighting creating safety hazards. The primary enclosures consisted of chain-link fencing with mesh spacing large enough for a large cat's paw to reach through. Brooke Landon, a 25-year-old marketing coordinator on a backpacking adventure, had arrived with her travel companion, a 27-year-old hospitality worker known for seeking thrilling experiences and dramatic social media content. The companion had been urging increasingly bold photo opportunities throughout their journey, pushing boundaries at every tourist stop. Their charter driver, a 41-year-old local patient, waited in the parking area while expressing concerns about their after-hours exploration plans. A 63-year-old groundskeeper had earlier directed visitors to remain behind the public barriers, but his warnings were dismissed as the facility prepared to close. The facility housed several large cats, including a mature female tiger that had been pacing restlessly along her enclosure's perimeter. The tiger had shown increasing agitation throughout the day as visitors gathered near her fence, and the approaching evening feeding time had heightened her predatory instincts. The standoff barrier was designed to keep visitors beyond the animal's reach, but its low height made it easy to cross for those seeking closer contact. Tigers are the largest wild cats in the world, with adult females weighing up to 350 pounds and possessing incredible strength and agility. These apex predators have evolved as solitary hunters, equipped with retractable claws up to 4 inches long and canine teeth measuring over 2 inches. A tiger's forelimbs are incredibly powerful, capable of delivering strikes with enough force to break bones and drag prey weighing several hundred pounds. Their hunting instincts are triggered by movement, and they possess lightning-fast reflexes that allow them to strike with deadly precision. Tigers in captivity often develop heightened territorial behaviors, becoming increasingly aggressive toward perceived threats. The attack unfolded with devastating speed as Brooke crossed the public barrier and positioned herself against the primary chain-link fence for a dramatic photograph. The female tiger, measuring over 8 feet in length, had been tracking her movement from inside the enclosure. As Brooke leaned against the mesh to adjust her pose, decorative items on her clothing swayed within the tiger's reach zone. The tiger lunged forward with explosive power, hooking Brooke's clothing and forearm through the mesh with her massive forepaw. The 4-inch claws penetrated deep into flesh and fabric, creating multiple puncture wounds along her arm. The tiger's incredible strength immediately pulled Brooke tight against the fence, trapping her against the chain-link barrier. The predator shifted her grip, clamping her powerful jaws around Brooke's arm near the shoulder. The tiger's canine teeth, designed for crushing bone and severing major blood vessels, penetrated through muscle and into the joint capsule. The bite force, measuring over 1,000 pounds per square inch, caused immediate fractures to the humerus and severe damage damage to the shoulder's vascular network. The tiger maintained her grip while shaking her massive head from side to side, a natural behavior used to subdue struggling prey. This violent motion tore through tendons, muscles, and major arteries in Brooke's shoulder and upper arm. Blood began flowing freely from multiple puncture wounds as the tiger's teeth severed the brachial artery and damaged surrounding tissue. The tiger continued to bite and crush the trapped limb through the fence. The sustained pressure from the powerful jaws caused progressive tissue destruction and massive internal bleeding. The tiger's claws, still embedded in her arm and torso, created additional wounds that contributed to the rapid blood loss. The struggle lasted less than 2 minutes as the tiger maintained control. The combination of crushing bite force, arterial damage, and multiple puncture wounds caused Brooke's blood pressure to drop rapidly. Shock set in as her body's systems began shutting down from the massive trauma and blood loss. Facility staff arrived within minutes, but the tiger refused to release her grip. Only after several attempts to distract the animal did she finally let go and retreat. By then, Brooke had lost consciousness from severe blood loss and trauma. Emergency responders transported Brooke to the nearest medical facility, but the extent of her injuries proved fatal. The combination of arterial damage, bone fractures, and massive tissue destruction had caused irreversible shock and organ failure. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The incident prompted an immediate investigation by local authorities, focusing on the facility's inadequate safety barriers and lack of supervision. International animal welfare organizations called for stricter regulations governing tourist interactions with dangerous wildlife. Brooke's family released a statement urging travelers to research safety standards at exotic animal facilities. It was May 14, 2022, at a renowned drive-through safari park in southern Africa, where visitors could observe wildlife from their vehicles along designated routes. The park's vast savanna was home to numerous lion prides, accustomed to tourist vehicles. Clear signage warned visitors to keep windows closed and doors locked at all times, with rangers reinforcing these critical safety rules at the gate. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grassland as the day's final tour groups moved through the predator sections. Ethan Crow, a 32-year-old software developer on vacation, had entered the park with his passenger, a 29-year-old freelancer known for casual rule-breaking and seeking perfect shots for social media. The freelancer had been encouraging closer encounters throughout their African adventure, dismissing safety protocols as overly cautious. A park warden, a firm 52-year-old ranger with decades of experience, had personally repeated the window rules to every visitor, emphasizing the deadly consequences of exposure. Behind them, a cautious teacher traveling with family had noticed their erratic driving patterns around the animals. The pride they encountered consisted of a dominant male lion with several females resting under an acacia tree, roughly 100 feet from the road. The massive male, weighing over 400 pounds, had been observing vehicles with typical feline indifference. However, the pride's behavior changed as Ethan's vehicle approached and stopped within 16 feet of the resting cats, violating park guidelines and placing them within the lion's strike range. Lions are apex predators perfectly designed for taking down large prey, with males reaching weights of up to 500 pounds and possessing incredible strength and speed. Despite their reputation for laziness, lions can accelerate from rest to 35 miles per hour in seconds when motivated to attack. Their powerful forelimbs are equipped with retractable claws up to 2 inches long, while their massive jaws deliver a bite force exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch. Male lions are particularly territorial and aggressive, especially when they perceive threats to their pride. Their hunting instincts are triggered by movement, sound, and scent. The fatal sequence began when Ethan lowered his driver's side window to capture better footage of the pride. The sound of the electric window and movement of his hand holding the camera immediately caught the attention of the dominant male. The lion's ears perked forward as he focused on the opening in what had been a sealed barrier. Ethan extended his arm outside the window for a closer angle, unaware his movements were being tracked by one of nature's most efficient predators. The male lion rose from his resting position with fluid grace, moving with deceptive casualness toward the vehicle. Each step brought the 400-pound predator closer to the exposed window, his golden eyes locked on the movement from the car's interior. The lion approached from the driver's side in a direct line, covering the distance in less than 10 seconds. Without warning, the lion reared up on his hind legs, bringing his massive frame to window height. His powerful forepaws gained purchase on the door frame as his claws extended for grip. The lion's enormous head thrust toward the open window, and his jaws clamped down on Ethan's neck and shoulder with devastating force. The initial bite crushed vertebrae and severed major blood vessels, including the carotid artery and jugular vein. The lion's incredible strength allowed him to drag Ethan partially through the window before pulling him completely from the vehicle to the ground. The predator's canine teeth, measuring over 2 inches, penetrated deep into the neck and upper chest, causing massive trauma to vital structures. The bite crushed the trachea and damaged the spinal cord while severing multiple major blood vessels. Once on the ground, the lion executed a controlling bite to Ethan's throat, a technique used to subdue large prey quickly. The powerful jaws maintained crushing pressure, while the lion's forepaws pinned the body to prevent escape. The combination of spinal damage, airway obstruction, and massive blood loss caused rapid unconsciousness. The lion held his position for several minutes, ensuring his prey was completely subdued. The crushing force continued to cause internal damage, while blood flowed from multiple puncture wounds. The attack lasted less than 3 minutes from initial approach to the final moments. Park rangers responded within minutes, but the lion maintained his position over Ethan's body, preventing immediate rescue attempts. Only after rangers used vehicles and noise to drive the lion away could they reach the victim. Emergency medical personnel arrived quickly, but Ethan's injuries were incompatible with life. The combination of spinal trauma, airway damage, and catastrophic blood loss had caused death within minutes of the initial attack. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of park safety protocols and visitor education programs. Enhanced signage and mandatory safety briefings were implemented. Ethan's family released a statement emphasizing the importance of following wildlife safety rules and supporting conservation efforts despite the tragedy. It was April 17, 2018, at a primate sanctuary in East Africa, where rescued chimpanzees lived in large enclosures designed to provide natural habitat while ensuring visitor safety. The sanctuary operated a double barrier system with a restricted buffer zone between the public walkway and primary enclosure, clearly marked with warning signs. The facility housed several troops in spacious compounds surrounded by reinforced fencing. A compromised section in the primary barrier had developed a hand-width gap that maintenance crews had not yet repaired. Jenna Carlisle, a 26-year-old environmental science graduate, had arrived as part of an educational tour focusing on primate conservation. She was accompanied by a 22-year-old student volunteer assigned to remind visitors about buffer zones and safety protocols. Their guide, a 47-year-old eco-tour specialist known for following procedures strictly, was leading another group through a different section when the incident occurred. A vigilant 35-year-old security guard was conducting perimeter patrol from the gatehouse, unaware that a visitor had breached the secondary barrier. The troop Jenna encountered consisted of 7 adult chimpanzees, including several large males and females who had shown increasing agitation as visitors gathered near their enclosure. These chimpanzees had been rescued from traumatic situations and retained heightened defensive behaviors around humans. The afternoon feeding schedule had been delayed, adding to their restlessness. The gap in the primary fencing had been created by repeated pressure from the chimps testing the barrier. Chimpanzees are among the most powerful primates on Earth, with adult males possessing strength 5 to 7 times greater than humans. These intelligent animals weigh up to 150 pounds and stand over 4 feet tall, with incredibly long arms that provide exceptional reach and leverage. Their hands are equipped with opposable thumbs and fingers capable of exerting crushing grip strength, while their canine teeth can grow up to 2 inches long. Chimpanzees are highly social animals that coordinate attacks when threatened, with multiple individuals working together to overwhelm perceived threats. The attack began when Jenna climbed the secondary fence to retrieve a dropped personal item in the restricted buffer zone. Her movement immediately triggered aggressive responses from the entire troop. who gathered at the primary fence line with escalating agitation as she approached the compromised barrier section. The first contact came when the largest male chimp seized Jenna's sleeve through the gap, using his powerful grip to pull her arm against the mesh. Within seconds, other troop members joined the assault. A second chimp grabbed her hair, while a third latched onto her other arm, creating multiple control points that prevented escape. The coordinated attack intensified as more chimpanzees reached through the gap to grasp clothing and exposed skin. Their powerful hands tore at fabric and flesh, while long fingers found purchase on her limbs and torso. The chimps pulled her tighter against the fence, bringing more of her body within reach of their grasping hands and snapping teeth. The troops' assault focused on typical chimpanzee target areas, with multiple animals biting at her hands, face, and arms simultaneously. Their 2-inch canine teeth punctured skin and muscle, creating deep wounds that bled profusely. The chimp's incredible grip strength crushed bones in her hands and fingers, while coordinated pulling motions caused severe tissue damage across her upper body. As the attack continued, the chimpanzees maintained their holds while delivering repeated bites and strikes. Their intelligence allowed them to coordinate the assault, with some animals holding her in position while others inflicted damage. Multiple bite wounds severed major blood vessels in her arms and neck, causing rapid blood loss that quickly led to shock. The sustained attack, with 7 adult chimpanzees participating simultaneously, created massive trauma across multiple body systems. Deep puncture wounds from canine teeth damaged vital structures, while powerful hands crushed bones and tore soft tissue. The combination of multiple arterial injuries and severe tissue destruction caused catastrophic blood loss. The assault continued for several minutes until security personnel arrived and used noisemakers and water hoses to drive the troop away from the fence. By the time they could safely extract Jenna from the barrier, she had lost consciousness from severe blood loss and trauma. Emergency responders transported Jenna to the nearest medical facility, but the extent of her injuries proved fatal. The combination of multiple arterial damage, severe tissue destruction, and massive blood loss had caused irreversible shock and organ failure. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival, despite aggressive resuscitation efforts. The incident prompted an immediate investigation by local authorities and international primate welfare organizations, focusing on barrier maintenance and visitor safety protocols. The compromised fencing section was immediately repaired and additional security measures implemented. Jenna's family released a statement supporting the sanctuary's conservation mission while calling for enhanced safety standards. Jenna Carlisle's story demonstrated how even well-intentioned conservation facilities can become deadly when safety barriers fail and intelligent and coordinated attackers coordinate attacks. It was March 15, 2018, at Wildwood Private Zoo in the remote hills of Montana, where the crisp mountain air carried the scent of pine and distant sounds of captive wildlife. The facility operated as a roadside attraction, offering close-up animal photos to small content creators and tourists, often accepting clients who were simply willing to pay the fee, regardless of their experience or online reach. The zoo's main attraction was an adult male grizzly bear kept in a simple steel bar enclosure designed more for viewing than containment. Although surrounded by wooded hills, the facility sat roughly 15 minutes from the nearest small town, which allowed first responders to reach it without significant delay. 25-year-old Thea Carmichael had driven 12 hours from Los Angeles, drawn by viral photos of another small creator posing with the same bear. With only a few thousand Instagram followers, Thea was still trying to grow her adventure page, which pushed her to attempt increasingly risky content to stand out. Her feed already showed cliff jumps, open water swims with sharks, and close encounters with dangerous wildlife, each one meant to make her look bolder than her modest following suggested. Marcus Webb, 52-year-old zoo owner and former circus trainer, had agreed to Thea's request for an exclusive photo shoot despite staff concerns. Webb prioritized profit over safety protocols, often bending rules for high-paying clients. Jake Morrison, a 28-year-old freelance photographer photographer desperate for work had been hired despite his limited wildlife photography experience. Kodiak, the zoo's 600-pound adult male grizzly, had already been showing signs of agitation that morning. He paced the length of his enclosure in slow, deliberate passes, huffing and lifting his head toward the scent of fresh meat being prepared in the adjacent feed room. The facility had no formal accreditation and was known locally for offering close-up encounters that larger institutions refused to allow, a reputation that often led staff to operate without the safeguards used in regulated parks. Staff recognized Kodiak's behavior as typical pre-feeding restlessness, and the facility's handler insisted on keeping the protective barrier in place. Webb dismissed the warning, arguing that the bear was accustomed to people and that the photo shoot needed an unobstructed view. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable predators, capable of running 35 miles per hour and possessing bite forces exceeding 1,200 pounds per square inch. Adult males can weigh up to 800 pounds, with massive claws measuring up to 4 inches long. Despite Kodiak's captive upbringing, his wild instincts remained intact, particularly when territorial boundaries were challenged. The fatal sequence began when Thea entered the enclosure through an open gate, positioning herself just 8 feet from the massive predator. Webb stood nearby with a tranquilizer gun, believing he could intervene if necessary. Thea raised her arm for a selfie pose, inadvertently triggering Kodiak's predatory response through her sudden movement and direct eye contact. According to witness statements, Kodiak moved toward Thea rapidly. Staff reported seeing the bear make contact with her, knocking her to the ground. Morrison later told investigators he heard Thea scream briefly before the sound stopped. Webb fired a tranquilizer dart, but it had no immediate effect. The bear continued the attack, unaffected by the sedative. Witnesses later told investigators they saw Kodiak pin her with his forelimbs and deliver multiple paw strikes to her head and upper body. Staff reported hearing the bear clamp onto her shoulder and upper torso, several short, forceful bites, a behavior consistent with territorial mauling rather than predation. In the final moments of the struggle, bear dragged her a short distance before settling over her, shielding the view of what happened next. Staff members shouted and banged on the enclosure barriers in an attempt to distract Kodiak. The bear remained focused on Thea for what witnesses estimated as several minutes. Webb considered entering the enclosure, but was restrained by other staff members who feared for his safety. Staff noise eventually caused Kodiak to disengage and move to the far corner of the enclosure. Only several minutes later did the tranquilizer begin to slow him. When staff could safely approach, they found Thea unresponsive with severe injuries. No vital signs were detected. Emergency responders arrived within 20 minutes, but could only pronounce Thea dead at the scene. The subsequent autopsy revealed the full extent of her injuries: multiple skull fractures, cervical spine damage, and extensive trauma to her head and torso. The medical examiner determined that death resulted from massive head trauma and associated complications. Authorities opened an investigation into the zoo's safety practices, noting that the photo shoot had been arranged without adequate barriers or emergency planning. The facility was shut down while legal proceedings moved forward, and the bear was transferred to a secure wildlife center. Webb later faced multiple negligence-related charges tied to the unsafe setup he approved. Morrison, who had been positioned just outside the enclosure and had witnessed the attack at close range, struggled to return to work afterward. For Thea's family, the incident became a stark reminder of how dangerous staged wildlife encounters can be. Her earlier posts about the planned photo shoot were later used by investigators to verify when she arrived and how the session had been arranged. The case concluded with a finding that the decision to place her inside the enclosure without safeguards directly led to the fatal outcome. It was August 7, 2017, deep within a remote section of the Brazilian Amazon rainforest, where dense canopy blocked sunlight from reaching the forest floor. The protected territory harbored countless species of wildlife, including some of South America's most dangerous predators. Narrow game trails wound through thick vegetation, connecting water sources that attracted both prey animals and apex predators. 38-year-old Graham Kincaid had illegally entered this protected territory to capture capture exotic animals for the black market. A professional poacher from Texas, Graham possessed years of experience trapping dangerous wildlife. His clientele included wealthy collectors willing to pay enormous sums for rare specimens. Carlos Mendez, a 45-year-old local guide, had reluctantly agreed to lead Graham deeper into the reserve, despite knowing the dangers. Carlos desperately needed money for his daughter's medical treatment, forcing him to accept this illegal job. The experienced guide recognized fresh signs of jaguar activity, but found his warnings consistently dismissed by Graham. Their destination was a remote area where wildlife researchers had recently documented an unusually large male jaguar. Graham had obtained this information through illegal channels, specifically targeting this location because of reports describing the massive cat. Graham established his base camp directly on a narrow game trail beside a tributary river, ignoring Carlos's urgent warnings about numerous jaguar signs surrounding the area. Fresh paw prints pressed into muddy earth, deep claw marks scored into tree bark, and the unmistakable musky scent of territorial markings filled the immediate vicinity. Carlos departed that evening, planning to return the following day to guide Graham back to civilization. Jaguars are the America's largest cats, with adult males weighing up to 250 pounds. These apex predators possess the strongest bite force of any big cat, capable of crushing turtle shells and caiman skulls. Unlike other large cats that suffocate their prey, jaguars kill by delivering devastating bites directly to the skull or neck, their powerful jaws designed to penetrate bone. When Carlos returned to the campsite the next morning as planned, he discovered a blood-soaked scene. Graham's equipment lay scattered across the area, with clear signs of a violent struggle. A distinct blood trail and disturbed vegetation led from the campsite deeper into the forest. Carlos immediately contacted Brazilian environmental authorities using his satellite phone. Investigators reconstructed the attack based on physical evidence at the scene. Multiple sets of large cat tracks indicated a jaguar estimated at 200 to 230 pounds had moved around the perimeter of the camp. Scratch marks on trees and disturbed undergrowth suggested the animal had approached from several directions before the encounter. The pattern of blood spatter, overturned equipment, and Graham's final position indicated he had been facing away from his attacker when struck. Investigators concluded the initial contact occurred near the center of the camp based on the concentration of blood evidence in scattered gear. Graham's crossbow was found approximately 10 feet from the main blood pool, with a bolt still loaded. Investigators determined he had chosen this weapon for its silence when avoiding park patrols, a common practice among poachers operating in protected areas. The weapon's position suggested Graham had detected a threat, but was unable to respond effectively. Forensic examination of the continuous blood trail, broken vegetation, and matching paw prints led authorities approximately 160 feet into the forest, where they recovered Graham's remains. The body showed evidence of predation consistent with jaguar attack patterns, including severe trauma to the neck and head region. Deep puncture wounds indicated the jaguar's powerful canine teeth had penetrated the skull, while claw marks across the torso revealed the animal's overwhelming physical dominance during the fatal encounter. The jaguar responsible was later identified through camera trap footage as a male estimated at 200 to 230 pounds on the large side for the region. Tracking data and photographic evidence documented the animal's continued presence in its territory following the incident. Wildlife biologists studying the footage noted the jaguar's distinctive rosette patterns and scarred left ear, likely from territorial disputes with other males competing for prime hunting grounds in the increasingly fragmented habitat. Brazilian environmental police used the case to highlight ongoing challenges with illegal wildlife trafficking in the Amazon region. Graham's family in Texas received notification of his death, though authorities provided limited details about the circumstances due to the ongoing investigation into his illegal activities. The incident served as a stark reminder of nature's unforgiving response to those who violate its protected sanctuaries. It was June 22, 2016, along an unpatrolled stretch of northeastern Brazil's coastline, where the Atlantic Ocean met a less regulated section of beach several miles north of Recife. The area stretched for miles along the Brazilian coast, bordered by palm trees and small beachside establishments that attracted backpackers and budget travelers. Few warning signs marked this remote shoreline, despite the known dangers of swimming after dark when predators moved closer to shore. 30 31-year-old Ronan Mercer had arrived in the region 3 days earlier as part of his South American backpacking adventure. A British traveler from Manchester, Ronan documented extreme activities across multiple continents on his travel blog. Witnesses later reported he had ignored multiple safety warnings from locals. Miguel Santos, the 29-year-old bartender at a small beachside bar, had served Ronan 8 caipirinhas throughout the evening. The establishment operated with minimal oversight, typical of remote coastal areas where alcohol service regulations were rarely enforced. Earlier that day, Isabella Costa, a local who worked part-time as a beach guide, had warned Ronan about the dangers of night swimming after observing his behavior around the water. The area was particularly dangerous due to its proximity to a river mouth, where fresh water mixed with salt water, creating murky conditions that attracted both fish and predators. Recent heavy rainfall had further reduced underwater visibility while concentrating marine life in shallow coastal areas. Local fishermen had reported several aggressive shark encounters in recent weeks. Bull sharks are among the ocean's most dangerous predators, responsible for more attacks on humans than any other shark species except great whites. These powerful hunters can grow up to 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds, with muscular bodies designed for explosive bursts of speed. Unlike most sharks that prefer deeper waters, bull sharks frequently hunt in shallow coastal areas and river mouths where prey congregates. Around midnight, witnesses observed Ronan leaving the bar and entering the ocean despite his intoxicated state. Security footage from a nearby establishment showed him wading into the water during high tide. Recent rainfall had reduced underwater visibility to less than 3 feet. Investigators later reviewed the footage frame by frame and noted that Ronan moved steadily into deeper water until the camera lost visibility in the darkness. A pair of backpackers walking along the shoreline around the same time reported hearing a sudden splash followed by silence, though heavy surf made it impossible to determine the source. Tidal analysis showed that currents in the area were strong enough to pull an impaired swimmer slightly north along the shoreline within minutes. These combined observations suggested Ronan remained in the water for only a short period before the attack occurred. At dawn, a local fisherman discovered remains washed ashore and immediately contacted authorities. The condition and location of the remains indicated the victim had been attacked approximately 50 yards from shore based on tidal drift patterns. Investigators reconstructed the attack based on physical evidence and expert analysis. Marine biologists examining the bite patterns determined they were consistent with a large bull shark estimated at 8 to 10 feet in length based on jaw spacing measurements. The distribution of injuries suggested an ambush-style attack from below, typical of bull shark hunting behavior in murky water conditions. Forensic analysis indicated the attack occurred in shallow water during peak hunting hours for the species. The victim's blood alcohol content, measured at 0.18%, would have significantly impaired swimming ability and situational awareness. Marine experts noted that erratic movements by intoxicated swimmers often trigger predatory responses in sharks. Local police opened a small-scale investigation due to limited resources in the remote area. Marine biologists reviewed recent shark activity, while British consular services notified Ronan's family. Authorities added warning signs along the coastline. Isabella Costa confirmed she had warned Ronan, and Miguel Santos was questioned about alcohol service before his work was temporarily restricted. The beachside establishment implemented new policies requiring staff to refuse service to heavily intoxicated customers planning water activities. Marine researchers used the incident data to advocate for increased shark monitoring programs along Brazil's northeastern coast. The tragedy highlighted the dangerous combination of alcohol consumption and unregulated coastal tourism in remote areas where emergency response capabilities remained severely limited. The bull shark responsible for the attack was never located. Marine biologists concluded the animal likely moved to other hunting grounds along the coast, following normal territorial patterns for the species. Environmental factors, including water temperature and prey availability, suggested the shark would continue hunting in similar coastal environments throughout the region. The case remains a sobering reminder of oceanic predators' unpredictable nature. It was October 14, 2015, at a remote research site in the forests of western Tanzania, where dense woodland stretched along the eastern shores of Lake Tanganyika. The area covered rugged terrain filled with steep valleys and thick vegetation. During mating season, territorial tensions between rival chimpanzee communities reached dangerous levels. 29-year-old Lila Monroe had arrived at the research station 3 weeks earlier to conduct behavioral research on aggressive chimpanzee troops for her doctoral thesis at a major American university. An ambitious primatologist, Lila had specifically chosen to study the area's most notorious troop, known for their violent territorial behavior. Joseph Mwanga, a 41-year-old experienced local guide, had worked with researchers for 15 years and understood chimpanzee behavior intimately. Joseph had warned Lila about the dangers of approaching the aggressive troop alone, particularly during mating season when testosterone levels peaked among males. Her research supervisor had established strict safety protocols requiring team observations for all fieldwork in boundary zones. The area where Lila planned to observe was a disputed boundary zone between two rival chimpanzee communities, making it extremely volatile. A local scout had reported unusual displays of aggression the previous week, including rock throwing and violent charging behaviors. Chimpanzees are humanity's closest living relatives, sharing 98.8% of human DNA, but they possess physical capabilities far exceeding those of humans. Adult males can weigh up to 130 pounds and stand 4 feet tall, with arm strength several times greater than humans. Their large canine teeth, measuring up to 2 inches long, are designed for both display and combat. During territorial disputes or mating season, male chimpanzees become extremely aggressive. Lila had signed out for a routine observation window that morning, logging her destination in the boundary zone as required by station protocol. She was expected to check in by early afternoon, but no further GPS movement was recorded after her initial entry into the disputed area. When she missed her scheduled return time, staff initiated standard search procedures. Joseph discovered Lila's body several hours after she failed to return to the research station at the scheduled time. Following her last known GPS coordinates from her tracking device, he located the site approximately 650 feet from the established observation point in a small clearing near the boundary zone. Investigators reconstructed the incident based on physical evidence at the scene. Lila's notebook, pen, and binoculars were found scattered across an area spanning approximately 30 feet. Her body was located near a fallen log at the far edge of this debris field. Footprint analysis revealed human tracks leading to a position at the clearing's edge, approximately 30 feet from where chimpanzee tracks were concentrated. Forensic examination revealed severe trauma consistent with chimpanzee attack patterns documented in scientific literature. The distribution and nature of injuries indicated an encounter with an adult male chimpanzee based on bite mark measurements and force patterns. Scene analysis showed disturbed vegetation and ground markings consistent with significant physical struggle. Lila's recovered research notes contained entries documenting chimpanzee territorial behaviors, but investigators could not determine the exact sequence of events leading to the attack. Her final written observations were recorded approximately 1 hour before her scheduled return time. The notes indicated she had observed unusual agitation among the male chimpanzees, with repeated displays of dominance behavior and territorial vocalizations that should have served as clear warning signs. The evidence indicated Lila had violated established safety protocols by conducting solo observations in a designated high-risk boundary zone without authorization. University guidelines required a minimum 100-foot distance and 2-person teams for all observations in territorial dispute areas. Local wildlife authorities launched an investigation focusing on protocol compliance and safety procedures. The research station temporarily suspended all independent field activities pending a comprehensive safety review. Lila's family in the United States received notification through university channels. The university conducted an internal investigation into the circumstances surrounding the unauthorized solo observation. Authorities expanded buffer zones around aggressive chimp territories and enforced stricter access rules. Researchers were required to use GPS tracking, emergency devices, and 2-person teams. The station added mandatory check-ins, and the university introduced new safety training and revised high-risk fieldwork approvals using data from the incident. It was September 3rd, 2019, in a remote swamp region of southern Florida, where vast wetlands spread across cypress stands and winding waterways. Recent drought had forced fish and alligators into shrinking pools, creating volatile hunting grounds for large males guarding limited territory. The heat that week had further lowered water levels, tightening predator territories even more there. 44-year-old Forrest Wells had driven down from Georgia with his longtime fishing partner, John Peterson, 59. The two had fished together for decades, but this trip was Forrest's idea. Recently divorced and restless, he pushed hard to visit a secluded pool rumored to hold trophy base. John tried to steer him elsewhere after locals warned about a large, aggressive alligator, but Forrest brushed it off. Buck, the 67-year-old bait shop owner, warned them again. Several anglers had reported close calls with a big male patrolling the same pool. Wildlife officials had even posted new warning signs noting heightened aggression during drought conditions. John read the signs carefully. Forrest barely looked at them. The pool they reached that afternoon was quiet and enclosed by cypress roots and dense vegetation. Slide marks cut through the mud, and torn fish carcasses floated near the bank. The musky odor of alligator musk hung thick in the humid air. John hesitated immediately, but Forrest moved straight towards the water, convinced he could handle anything. John made one last attempt to convince Forrest to stay on the bank, reminding him that drought often pushed large males into shallow water and made their movements unpredictable. He pointed out the floating carcasses and the heavy musk scent over the pool, warning that these were unmistakable signs of recent predatory activity. Forrest brushed off the warning with a dismissive grin, acting as though a large alligator was nothing serious. John later told investigators that he sensed something was wrong. American alligators can remain motionless for long periods before launching explosive ambushes. Adult males can exceed 12 feet and weigh hundreds of pounds, with jaws capable of crushing bone. During drought, competition intensifies, and dominant males guard shrinking water bodies aggressively. John stayed on the bank while Forrest waded into the pool. Forrest moved about 40 feet out until the water reached his waist, casting towards the deeper center. John urged him to return, pointing to faint ripples moving against the wind. Forrest waved him off. Minutes later, John heard a low, heavy splash, distinct from a fish strike. He looked up and saw a broad wake pushing fast toward Forrest from the opposite bank. Forrest paused mid-cast just as the alligator's head broke the surface, its snout angled directly toward him. John yelled for him to move back, but Forrest seemed frozen for a second, confused by the sudden disturbance. The alligator surged the final few feet with a burst of speed, lifting half its body out of the water as it struck Forrest from the side. The hit knocked him off balance, and John saw Forrest's arms flail as the jaws clamped around his torso. The force folded him sideways and dragged him beneath the surface in one violent motion. John ran along the shoreline, shouting for him to swim toward the bank. Forrest broke the surface once, gasping and thrashing with only his shoulders visible. The alligator immediately rolled, dragging him under again. John described seeing a swirl of mud and bubbles rising before the water went still. For a brief moment, John scanned the pool for any sign of movement, an arm, bubbles, anything, but the surface settled into complete silence, except for widening ripples. He moved farther down the bank, calling Forrest's name and watching the water for another resurfacing, but nothing broke the surface. Several seconds stretched into minutes, confirming the alligator had dragged Forrest into deeper water beyond John's view. John sprinted back down the trail for help, reaching other anglers near the parking area, who immediately contacted authorities. Search crews arrived before sunset, but found no sign of Forrest. With deep water and near zero visibility, officials suspended the effort until daylight. Divers recovered Forrest's body the next morning, wedged beneath a submerged log. The positioning matched classic alligator caching behavior, where prey is held underwater for later feeding. The body showed severe trauma, along with signs of drowning. Bite measurements indicated an attack by a large adult male. Officials confirmed that warning signs were properly posted, but noted the remoteness of the location made monitoring difficult. John provided a full account, explaining that Forrest had ignored repeated warnings and waded far deeper than recommended. Authorities later captured the alligator using baited hooks. The animal measured 12 feet long and weighed roughly 800 pounds because it had been confirmed in a fatal attack and showed signs of human conditioning. Old fishing hooks embedded in its jaw. It was euthanized in accordance with state wildlife protocols. Biologists later examined the carcass to document behavioral indicators linked to repeated human contact. Forrest's family family in Georgia received notification through state officials, and his ex-wife issued a brief acknowledgement of the circumstances. Wildlife authorities increased patrols and added more warning signs in drought-affected areas, while new rules required fishing guides to carry emergency communication gear and complete alligator safety training. The pool was closed to public access. For John, the attack remained a stark reminder of the dangers hidden in Florida's wetland. It was August 17, 2018, in Glacier National Park, Montana. The morning was cool and clear, sunlight cutting through the valley fog. It was the kind of day that drew hikers, photographers, and tourists out early. But for one visitor, the stillness ahead of noon would end violently. Riley Voss, 24, had flown from San Diego the week before. She wasn't famous, but she was trying to be. Her social media feed, 3,000 followers, mostly friends and classmates, was filled with beach sunsets, thrift store fashion, and now the outdoors. She wanted a new direction, wilderness content. She told people she was building a cottagecore adventure vibe. She had read articles about Glacier's beauty and bought all the right gear: new hiking boots, a neon windbreaker, a small tripod, and bear spray. Her parents thought the trip was spontaneous but harmless. She'd saved enough from part-time photography gigs to fund it. Riley's friends didn't see her as a risk taker. She was simply inexperienced and probably thought she knew more than she did. She wasn't camping deep in the backcountry. She chose accessible trails where she could still get cell service and frame aesthetic shots of lakes and trees. That morning, she texted one of her friends her plan: to find the alder grove where the sunlight broke through like stained glass and take a photo in front of it. Glacier's grizzly population, around 300 individuals, was stable but closely monitored. Females with cubs were notoriously defensive. Weighing around 400 pounds, they could sprint up to 30 miles per hour and crush bone with a bite force exceeding 1,000 psi. Rangers drilled these facts into visitors daily, reminding them to make noise, hike in groups, and carry bear spray in hand, not buried in a pack. Riley had seen the warning signs at the trailhead that morning, complete with an image of a mother bear and cub. Other tourists recalled her laughing quietly, taking a picture of the sign. She later posted that picture on her social media story, captioned, "I'll be fine, haha." The first mistake came early. She passed a pair of hikers heading back, who warned her about bear activity near the grove. They'd seen scat and heard huffing noises. She thanked them, said she'd be careful, and still continued. At a bend, she stopped to set up her tripod beside a thicket of alder and berry shrubs. The area was rich with late summer fruit, a perfect feeding ground for bears. The air smelled faintly of sweet berries and musk, something she didn't recognize. Her second mistake was silence. She didn't talk, sing, or make noise. She was focused on framing the shot, stepping backward, adjusting angles. She wasn't paying attention to what was 20 feet away, half hidden in brush. A female grizzly was there, feeding with her cub. The bear likely noticed Riley first, pausing during feeding. Grizzlies give warnings: huffs, head sways, jaw pops. Riley heard the sounds but mistook them for wind. She moved closer to the tripod, her camera taking multiple photos at once. In the pictures recovered later, the first ones showed her smiling toward the lens. Then, motion blurred behind her. Witnesses on the ridge above, two backpackers, heard the low roar before they saw her run. She bolted forward, stumbling in the tall grass, turning halfway back toward her pack. The bear charged, covering the ground in seconds. She yanked at her pack, fumbling for the bear spray but pulled out the wrong canister, an insect repellent. She sprayed it blindly, realizing too late it wasn't bear spray. The bear swiped, striking her shoulder. The impact spun her sideways, her scream cutting short. She fell hard, rolling once before the bear was on her. It pinned her to the ground, jaws clamping on her back. The witnesses later said the sound alone told the story. Short, confused, and then abruptly quiet. The grizzly tore through fabric and flesh, biting down along her spine and shoulder blades. One arm broke instantly. She kicked weakly, her boot scraping dirt. Witnesses shouted from the ridge, trying to make noise, but they were too far. The bear lifted its head briefly, huffed, then bit again at her neck and side. When it finally stepped off, she wasn't moving. The cub sniffed at her backpack before both disappeared into the brush. The attack lasted less than a minute. The backpackers managed to get a call through after hiking up the ridge for signal. When rangers arrived 40 minutes later, alerted by the witnesses, the site was silent. They found the insect repellent canister lying a few feet from her. Bear spray was still zipped inside her bag, unused. Her death scene was methodically documented. Deep claw marks lined her back and torso. The pattern of punctures matched a defensive mother bear's strike sequence. There was no sign she'd tried to climb or run uphill, just panic in the open. After reviewing the evidence, officials Officials euthanized the sow under Glacier's policy for defensive attacks near popular trails, confirming through necropsy that the incident wasn't predatory. Online, the story spread for a short period of time. Influencer mauled after mistaking bug spray for bear spray. Within days, it fed into jokes and outrage. Some called it tragic. Others called it stupid. Riley's parents flew to Montana to bring her home. For 3 days, the algorithm carried her image, and it faded. Another story replaced it, another reminder of how fast the wilderness punishes ignorance. It was May 10th, 2015, in a large public park in Los Angeles, California. Families spread blankets under sycamores, kids chased each other between tables, and the smell of charcoal drifted through the picnic area. No one there expected anything worse than a sunburn. Travis Linton, 29, worked construction in Burbank and liked to say rules were for people with no common sense. His wife, Megan, also 29, handled customer service for a car rental company. They were ordinary, working parents trying to make a Sunday special for their 3-year-old Caleb. They'd packed fried chicken, chips, and juice boxes. Megan wanted cute pictures for Facebook. Travis wanted to grill and relax. Neither of them cared much for park regulations. They'd seen the "Do Not Feed Wildlife" signs countless times and treated them like decoration. Coyotes were a familiar sight around the Los Angeles parks. Locals knew them as scrappy survivors, thin but bold, often slipping between picnic areas in daylight. Rangers warned repeatedly that feeding them made them aggressive. Still, visitors tossed food anyway. Chips, hot dogs, even leftovers, to get close photos. The Lintons were no different. Travis thought it was funny, a harmless way to show his son a real animal. He didn't understand that these animals, lean 40-pound predators with jaws strong enough to crush a rabbit's spine, weren't pets or mascots. They moved silently when they wanted to, watching from brush lines with a patience most people mistook for curiosity. Were opportunists conditioned by human stupidity. That afternoon, the park looked deceptively peaceful. The air shimmered with heat, and the grass around the tables had gone patchy from drought. A coyote lingered in the tree line, its coat dull gray and tan, ribs faintly visible. Megan spotted it first. She pointed, phone in hand. Travis whistled and threw a potato chip. The coyote froze and crept closer, shoulders low, eyes fixed on the food. Another chip followed, and a chicken bone. Their visitors noticed but didn't intervene. People see coyotes often and assume they're harmless. The animal inched within 20 feet, head tilted, ears twitching. Travis kept throwing food, laughing, calling it friendly. Megan filmed from a few feet away, narrating. The coyote sat down, tail curled, waiting for more. When Caleb toddled from the blanket clutching a hot dog bun, neither parent stopped him. That was the final mistake, one that mixed ignorance, arrogance, and neglect. The coyote's instincts kicked in. It saw motion and food in one small, slow-moving target. Witnesses later said the attack happened fast. The animal darted forward in a blur of gray. Megan's phone dropped. The animal clamped its jaws around the child's neck, shaking once, dragging him several feet into the grass. The scream that followed wasn't from the child, it was from his mother. Travis lunged, tripping over the cooler. He reached the coyote and kicked it hard, then grabbed Caleb's arm and pulled. For several seconds, there was a horrific tug-of-war. Travis pulling his son by the arm, the coyote jerking at his neck. The animal finally let go after being startled due to the sound of shouting and multiple approaching footsteps. The coyote vanished into the trees. Caleb lay motionless on the ground, his shirt soaked through. Travis pressed his hand against the wounds, yelling for help, but it was useless. The bite had torn deep into his neck, severing major blood vessels. Witnesses described blood pooling fast in the dirt. Megan screamed for an ambulance, but every second dragged. Rangers and LAPD units arrived within 5 minutes after multiple 911 calls. They found Travis on his knees, shaking his son's shoulders, repeating his name. Paramedics took over, but the child had already gone pale. Wildlife officers located the coyote within the hour, near the base of a hill, and euthanized it on site. A necropsy performed by wildlife authorities confirmed stomach contents of chicken bones and chips. It had been fed repeatedly, likely by visitors over several months. Wildlife officers called it a textbook case of food conditioning. The park was cleared by evening, and a temporary closure went into effect the next morning. Some people blamed the park for not fencing off the area. Others blamed the parents. It was July 22nd, 2014, in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. Families posed for pictures beside steaming vents, laughing at the sulfur smell. The warning signs about keeping distance from wildlife blended into the scenery, noticed but ignored. Before noon, though, a crowd would stand frozen in silence near the lower geyser basin, staring at the body of a man who learned too late that the signs weren't jokes. Darren Kopel was 45, an air conditioning technician from Kansas City. He'd driven his wife, Linda, and their 2 teenagers through the park that week in a rented SUV. It was their first real family vacation in years, planned after Linda's insistence that they see nature before the kids go to college. Darren had been unimpressed from day one. He'd complained about gas prices, the crowds, and the smell of sulfur. He was the kind of man who didn't believe in danger unless he saw it himself. To him, the park rangers were overcautious, the animals docile. He'd told his family repeatedly that bison were just big cows. He wasn't stupid in the way of not knowing better. He was stupid in the way of thinking he knew best. Every morning, he'd mock the posted warnings, reading them aloud in a sarcastic tone. He laughed at other tourists taking photos from the boardwalk, muttering that people were scared of grass eaters. When Linda told him about a news story of someone gored years prior, he brushed it off as bad luck. The irony was that Darren thought of himself as practical, a man who fixed machines for a living, used logic, and distrusted experts. The lower geyser basin was a wide, open stretch of steaming ground, dotted with boiling pools and herds of bison grazing on dry grass. The park's bison population numbered in the thousands, with mature bulls weighing up to 2,000 pounds and standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder. Despite their size, they could sprint at 35 miles per hour and pivot faster than a horse. Rangers warned that bison injured more people each year than bears or wolves combined. Still, people treated them like props for vacation photos, walking too close, speaking softly like they were tame. That morning, a bull bison grazed near the safety barrier, about 50 yards from the walkway. Tourists stopped to take pictures, content to keep their distance. Darren wasn't. His son filmed on a small camera as Darren climbed over the railing. Several witnesses later confirmed his wife's voice could be heard on the video telling him to stop. He waved her off and trudged toward the animal, grinning at onlookers. At about 20 feet, the bison lifted its head and stared. Darren stopped, shrugged, and turned around as if to pose. Someone in the crowd muttered that he was too close. He took another few steps forward, closing the gap to 10 feet. His daughter later said he wanted a natural shot, with the bison looking directly at him. He waved his arms in the air to get its attention. The bull's tail flicked once. It lowered its head and pawed the ground, a clear textbook warning. Several people on the boardwalk started backing away. Darren, grinning, kept his back turned, adjusting his hat. He never saw it start to move. The bison charged, its hooves striking hard and fast. Witnesses said the animal covered the distance in less than 2 seconds. The impact was brutal. The horn entered his abdomen just above the pelvis, lifting him clear off the ground. The force flipped him sideways, his body twisting unnaturally before hitting the dirt. For a moment, he lay motionless. Then the bull lunged again, hooking him beneath the ribs and throwing him several feet. His scream was short and sharp, ending abruptly as he hit the ground. The sound of the trampling was sickening, a thud and crunch that silenced the crowd. The bison stomped once on his chest before swinging its head and walking off, breathing hard, tail raised. Other tourists saw Linda run forward, dropping to her knees beside him, while screaming at them to call for help. Blood spread quickly through his shirt. The horn had torn through his abdomen and out his lower back, shattering ribs and rupturing internal organs. A ranger later stated that the injuries were not survivable. His eyes were open, but there was no recognition left. When rangers arrived minutes later, they secured the scene and pushed back the crowd. One ranger checked for a pulse, but shook his head almost immediately. Linda's hands were covered in blood. The kids stood several yards away, frozen. Paramedics declared him dead where he fell. The cause of death was listed as massive internal trauma due to bison goring. Rangers cleared the area, herded the animal away, and reopened the trail the next morning. The Park Service released a short statement reminding visitors that bison are unpredictable and can run 3 times faster than humans. It wasn't the first visitor injury that year, and it wouldn't be the last. His family refused interviews. They left the park that evening, driving straight back to Kansas City without stopping. A small local obituary ran 3 days later, omitting the details of how he died. It was March 27, 2016, in Gainesville, Florida. On a small private property outside town, two cassowaries stalked their pen in slow circles. They were beautiful, prehistoric-looking birds, towering, black-feathered, crowned with hard casques. By nightfall, one of them would be pacing over the body of its owner. Elliot Crane was 38, a self-taught, exotic bird breeder who treated his backyard collection like a miniature zoo. He owned peafowl, emus, crowned cranes, and the cassowaries, his pride. He was known online in a small exotic pet forum as the guy who proved cassowaries could be handled safely with calm energy. His videos showed him hand-feeding fruit to them through the fence and bragging that they were misunderstood. In reality, he was a hobbyist who thought familiarity meant control. He wasn't malicious, just naive and overconfident, a dangerous mix when dealing with one of the deadliest birds on the planet. He ran the menagerie mostly alone, a few acres of pens and sheds behind his house. He made enough money breeding parrots and rare pheasants to fund his collection. Friends said he wanted to open a small educational park one day. That goal blinded him to risk. Wildlife officers had warned him twice about his cassowaries after being noted by his guests. Inspection reports later confirmed prior concerns about enclosure safety. He ignored them, claiming his birds were tame. He treated them like oversized pets, walking near them without a barrier, feeding by hand, and posting selfies from inside the enclosure. He convinced himself his familiarity meant safety. The cassowary pen sat at the back of the property, fenced with a 6-foot chain link, shaded by palms and overgrown ferns. That day, the ground was slick from the morning storm. The male cassowary, a 6-foot-tall, roughly 130-pound bird, had been especially agitated. It was breeding season, when males guard nests and become aggressively territorial. Cassowaries can sprint up to 30 miles per hour and leap over 5 feet in a single bound. Their inner claw, 5 inches long, acts like a dagger capable of slicing through flesh and bone. Wildlife officers describe them as living velociraptors, and that's not exaggeration. Elliot knew this. He just thought his hand-raised birds were different. The first mistake came early that afternoon. Neighbors said they heard him talking loudly in the pen, likely calling to the birds while cleaning. According to later scene reconstruction, he'd entered right after the rain stopped, boots slipping slightly on the wet mud. A long rake and a bucket of feed lay near the fence, signs he'd planned routine maintenance. One of the cassowaries was near the far end, pacing. The other, the male, was closer, its casque lowered slightly, feathers puffed. These were clear warnings. Elliot ignored them, like he always did. At some point, he slipped. The ground inside the pen had turned soft and uneven from the storm. Investigators later found a heel print skidded across a wet patch beside the water pan, then a broad smear where he hit the ground. That was the trigger. To a cassowary, sudden motion near its territory means threat. Witnesses weren't present, but the scene reconstruction told enough. He fell backward, scrambled, and likely made eye contact. The male closed the distance almost instantly. The first kick hit his thigh, the claws tearing through jeans and deep into muscle. The second connected higher, ripping open his groin and severing his femoral artery. He tried to roll away, leaving gouges in the mud where his hands clawed for traction. The cassowary kept striking, rapid two-legged jumps that brought both feet forward, each blow driving talons into soft tissue. The bird's weight and speed turned each kick into a weapon. Evidence showed defensive wounds on his arms and forearms, suggesting he tried to block the attacks, but it didn't matter because he was bleeding out in seconds. The screams carried beyond the property line. A neighbor later said they lasted less than 30 seconds, ending suddenly. By the time the neighbor arrived, the cassowary stood near the body, feathers fluffed, hissing. The gate to the pen was ajar. Elliot lay on his back, motionless, eyes open, surrounded by churned mud streaked with blood. His jeans were shredded. The fatal wound, a deep gash across the upper thigh, had pumped out enough blood to stain the soil black. Deputies and wildlife officers arrived minutes later after being called by the neighbor. They used poles and barriers to corner the cassowary, which paced and hissed as if still guarding its territory. Once sedated, they removed it from the enclosure and confirmed Elliot was dead at the scene. Paramedics noted catastrophic blood loss and multiple lacerations consistent with cassowary kicks. A medical examiner later confirmed femoral artery transection as the primary cause of death. His death was instant in biological terms. He bled out before he had a chance to crawl to the gate. Wildlife conservation authorities euthanized the cassowary the next morning. It wasn't out of vengeance, it was policy. Any animal that kills a human is considered too dangerous to keep. Elliot's forum community, almost 100 people, posted brief memorials calling him a passionate animal lover. The truth was simpler and less flattering. His property was cleared within a month. Elliot's family family held a small funeral at a local church in Gainesville a week later. His daughter spoke briefly, describing his lifelong fascination with animals and how much time he spent caring for them. His remaining exotic birds were transferred to a licensed rehabilitation facility under wildlife authorities' supervision. It was September 7, 2013, along the Mary River in Australia's Northern Territory. The air was thick with humidity and the constant buzz of insects, and the water moved slow and deceptively calm under the moonlight. To anyone familiar with the area, it was the kind of night that warned people to stay back from the riverbank. But to Declan Murren and his friends, it was just another stop on their long weekend camping trip. A night of laughter, cheap beer, and poor decisions that would end with one of them gone. Declan was 33, a refrigeration technician from Darwin. He was known among co-workers for being confident to the point of arrogance. He'd grown up near the coast, fishing in crocodile country, and liked to tell people he could read the water. He wasn't reckless by nature, but alcohol had a way of amplifying his need to prove a point. His friends described him as the one who always pushed things just a little too far, climbing higher, driving faster, testing limits just to see where they'd give. That weekend had been his idea. He'd gathered 6 friends for a 3-day trip at Cahill's Crossing on the Mary River, one of the most notorious crocodile habitats in the country. The men brought tents, coolers, and an old Bluetooth speaker. They ignored the large yellow warning signs near the bank that depicted a stylized crocodile silhouette. To them, it was just a symbol, something meant to scare tourists. They'd joked that locals exaggerated the danger to keep the best fishing spots to themselves. By late evening, several empty cans lay scattered around the fire pit, and Declan was in the middle of his 6th beer when he made the bet. The Mary River, wide and slow, cuts through floodplain country lined with pandanus and paperbark. At night, the surface reflects the stars like oil. Beneath that calm are some of the densest populations of saltwater crocodiles in the world, massive reptiles that can exceed 16 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds. These predators ambush from below, relying on patience and stealth. Their jaws can exert over 3,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, and once they have hold of prey, escape is nearly impossible. Throughout the day, the group had seen multiple warnings. Locals passing in a ute had told them not to camp near the crossing. Earlier that evening, they'd spotted a floating log that turned out to have eyes. It submerged silently when someone pointed a flashlight at it. Declan brushed it off as just watching. Even when a bull croc slapped its tail upstream, sending ripples through the shallows, he laughed it off. It wasn't ignorance. He knew how dangerous they were, but years of hearing the same cautionary tales had dulled the threat into something abstract. He decided the river was only dangerous for the careless. Close to midnight, men gathered near the edge of the water, voices raised over the hiss of insects. They'd been drinking for hours, arguing over whether anyone actually swam in the river anymore. Someone joked that if Declan really wasn't afraid of crocodiles, he should prove it. Declan stripped off his shirt and walked toward the muddy slope, still grinning. The others half cheered, half protested. He stepped into the river barefoot, sinking into the silt. The water reached his knees, then his waist. He splashed once, sending arcs of water glittering under the moonlight, shouting that crocodiles were scared of people. For a few seconds, nothing happened, just the sound of water and laughter. Then the surface bulged 10 feet behind him. The crocodile's head rose almost soundlessly. Witnesses later described it as too fast to register. The animal closed the distance in less than a second. The first impact sounded like a gunshot as the jaws clamped over Declan's torso. His body folded, and the water exploded around them. He made one high, startled cry before being pulled under. The water churned, bubbles and thrashing visible in the beam of a flashlight. The others froze for a moment, too stunned to move. Then came a muffled yell, and the water went still again. For a few seconds, everyone stood in silence. Then one man ran forward, shouting Declan's name, but the river gave nothing back. One man grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the river. 2 glowing eyes reflected the beam 20 yards out, stationary, watching. A faint red stain spread from where Declan had gone under. Search teams arrived at dawn after one of them called for help. The men hadn't slept. They sat near the bank, hollow-eyed, their campsite littered with crushed beer cans and trampled grass. Police and rangers launched boats downstream. The Mary River current was slow but deceptive. The murky water hid everything beneath a thin green film. About a mile downriver, near a snag of branches, a ranger spotted a shape caught against a log. It was Declan's body, missing his left arm and part of his lower torso. torso. Police described the injuries as consistent with a large saltwater crocodile's feeding behavior. Not a single strike. Wildlife officers set a trap near the crossing that evening, a steel cage baited with meat. Within 2 days, they captured the crocodile, a massive animal with deep scars along its flanks. Parks and wildlife staff measured it at 13 feet 4 inches long and performed DNA tests on material recovered from the remains. The officers euthanized it, citing the risk to other visitors. Declan's funeral was held 4 days later at a small chapel near his parents' home. About 50 people came, mostly family and co-workers. His brother called it a stupid accident, saying Declan's stubborn streak had finally caught up with him. His mother kept the coffin closed and barred the media from entering. A police spokesperson later confirmed alcohol was a contributing factor and called the death preventable. The friends who'd been with him didn't speak publicly about it again. It was June 14, 2019, along the muddy banks of the Tarcoles River in Punta Arenas province, Costa Rica. The river, notorious for its dense population of American crocodiles, winds through mangrove forests before emptying into the Pacific. Locals and tourists alike flock to the bridge above to watch the massive reptiles bask on sandbars below. Illegal feeding over the years had conditioned many of the crocodiles to associate humans with food, making them bolder and more willing to approach the shoreline. The low water season had exposed more of the muddy banks, creating deceptive footing that appeared solid but was slick with algae and decomposing vegetation. Warning signs posted along the bridge and riverbank had faded from sun exposure, their messages barely legible. Sofia Rojas, a 25-year-old marketing assistant from San Jose, had driven down with her friend Carla Jimenez for a weekend getaway. Both women were drawn to the thrill of close wildlife encounters, often posting videos to social media. That afternoon, they hired Diego Vargas, a 47-year-old boatman known for his cautious nature and strict adherence to safety protocols. Diego had been ferrying tourists along the river for over a decade and had seen firsthand how dangerous the crocodiles could become when provoked. He warned the women repeatedly not to approach the water's edge or attempt to feed the animals. A park warden patrolling the bridge above also shouted down warnings, his stern voice carrying over the humid air. The repeated cautions hinted at the very real danger lurking just beneath the surface. 2 other tourists sat quietly in the skiff, visibly uncomfortable with what was unfolding. Diego had even mentioned a recent incident where a crocodile had lunged at a fisherman who got too close. Sofia, however, was determined to capture something dramatic. She carried a plastic bag filled with fish scraps, intending to lure a crocodile close enough for a striking video. Carla encouraged her, phone in hand, ready to record. Diego idled the skiff a few meters offshore, shaking his head but saying nothing more. The midday heat pressed down as several crocodiles floated lazily near the surface, their eyes and nostrils barely visible above the waterline. American crocodiles are among the largest reptilian predators in the Western Hemisphere, capable of reaching lengths over 13 feet and weighing upwards of 880 pounds. Unlike their more aggressive cousins, they are generally wary of humans, but food conditioning erases that natural caution. They are ambush hunters, relying on explosive bursts of speed from a stationary position. Their jaws exert crushing force, and once they secure a grip, they employ a signature maneuver, the death roll, a violent rotational spin designed to disorient prey and tear flesh. In the Tarcoles River, these animals have become accustomed to boats and human presence, making them unpredictable and dangerous. Sofia stepped onto the slick bank, her sandals sinking slightly into the algae-coated mud. She waved a fish scrap toward the water, laughing as a large crocodile began to angle toward her. The animal moved with eerie silence, only its eyes and the ridge of its snout breaking the surface. Sofia turned her back to the river for a moment, grinning at Carla and the camera. Her heel slipped on the wet surface. She windmilled her arms, struggling to regain balance. The crocodile exploded upward from the shallow shelf. Its jaws snapped shut around her lower left leg just above the ankle. The bite was immediate and total, teeth punching through skin, muscle, and compressing bone. Sofia was yanked off her feet and dragged backward into knee-deep water. She tried to brace her free leg against the riverbed, but the crocodile was already in motion. It twisted its entire body in a rapid, forceful roll. Her knee dislocated with an audible pop as ligaments tore. The rotational force pulled her completely under the surface, and a cloud of silt erupted around them. The crocodile released briefly, repositioning for a better hold. It clamped down again, this time higher on her thigh. The teeth sank deep, severing the femoral artery. Blood darkened the water in thick plumes. The animal dragged her toward a deeper channel, its powerful tail sweeping side to side. Sophia's head went under again. She could not surface. The crocodile maintained its grip, holding her submerged as she struggled. Her movements weakened. Water filled her lungs. The combination of catastrophic blood loss and drowning ended her life within minutes. The crocodile eventually released her body in the deeper current, where it drifted before snagging on submerged roots. Nearby crocodiles, drawn by the splashing and scent of blood, began to gather in the shallows, a common behavioral response in areas where multiple animals compete for food. Diego radioed for help immediately, but by the time authorities arrived, there was nothing to be done. Sophia's body was recovered later that afternoon. The park warden filed a report citing repeated safety violations and the dangers of feeding wildlife. Her family released a brief statement expressing their grief and urging others to respect wildlife boundaries. Local officials announced plans to increase patrols and remove habituated crocodiles from high-traffic areas. It was September 17, 2018, near a roadside meadow in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the golden grassland, where wild berries still clung to low bushes, drawing wildlife out into the open. Cars lined the pullout along the main road, their occupants spilling onto the shoulder with cameras and phones raised. About 230 feet into the meadow, a grizzly sow and her two cubs foraged peacefully. The cubs tumbling over each other while their mother stripped berries from branches with practiced efficiency. Park rangers moved along the crowd, reminding visitors of the mandatory 100-yard distance rule for bears, but the excitement made compliance difficult. Margaret Doyle, a 39-year-old accountant from Ohio, had been traveling through the park with her companion Daniel Price, a 41-year-old software engineer. The two had planned the trip for months, eager to experience Yellowstone's wildlife. Daniel was cautious by nature, constantly checking park guidelines and urging Margaret to stay behind the low rope barrier that rangers had hastily strung between wooden posts. Ranger Lewis, a 31-year-old with 5 years of experience, patrolled the growing crowd with visible frustration. He repeated the distance rule multiple times, his tone growing sharper as people edged closer. A retired teacher in her early 60s stood near Margaret, mentioning casually that she had seen a sign earlier that morning warning of recent bear activity in the area. The repeated warnings and the visible tension among park staff hinted at the volatility of the situation, but the allure of a close-up photograph proved too strong for many. Margaret stepped past the rope barrier, moving several meters into the meadow. She wanted a selfie with one of the cubs visible in the background. Daniel called after her, his voice tight with concern, but she waved him off. She lowered into a crouch to steady her phone, her back partially turned toward the sow. Grizzly bears are among the most formidable predators in North America, with adult females weighing between 290 and 400 pounds and males often exceeding 600 pounds. Despite their size, they are capable of reaching speeds up to about 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Sows with cubs are especially dangerous, driven by an intense protective instinct. Any perceived threat to their young can trigger a defensive charge, and unlike bluff charges meant to intimidate, a committed attack involves devastating physical force. Their claws, measuring up to 10 centimeters, and powerful jaws can inflict catastrophic injuries within seconds. The sow lifted her head, nostrils flaring. She huffed once, a sharp exhalation that carried across the meadow. Then she charged. Her massive body closed the distance with terrifying speed, paws pounding the earth in a rhythmic thunder. Margaret rose from her crouch and turned, stumbling backward over a small hummock of grass. She fell as the bear reached her. The sow struck first with her right forelimb, a sweeping blow that caught Margaret across the shoulder and chest, sending her sprawling onto her side. The bear was on her instantly, pressing down with her full weight. Her jaws clamped onto Margaret's left shoulder, teeth punching through the fabric of her jacket and into the muscle beneath. The bite crushed the clavicle with an audible crack. The sow shook her head once, a violent lateral motion that tore tissue and dislocated the shoulder joint. Margaret's right arm flailed. The bear repositioned, planting a forepaw on her midsection and driving the air from her lungs. The sow bit again, this time targeting the upper chest and neck area. Teeth penetrated deep, severing blood vessels and crushing the trachea. Blood poured from the wounds, soaking into the grass. The bear lifted her head briefly, scanning the crowd of onlookers who had begun to scatter and shout. She returned her attention to Margaret, delivering another crushing bite to the torso. Ribs fractured under the pressure. Internal organs were compressed and torn. The sow stepped back, huffing and swaying her head. She made a short, mock charge toward a man who had moved closer, then circled back to her cubs. Ranger Lewis discharged a canister of bear spray in the sow's direction, creating a protective barrier of aerosol that helped push the animal back toward the tree line. A standard emergency response in bear encounters. She herded them quickly toward the tree line, glancing back once before disappearing into the forest. Margaret lay motionless in the trampled grass, her injuries incompatible with life. Massive hemorrhaging from the neck and chest wounds, combined with traumatic damage to vital structures, had caused rapid cardiovascular collapse. Ranger Lewis radioed for emergency response, but paramedics arriving minutes later could only confirm what was already evident. The park launched an immediate investigation, closing the meadow and surrounding trails. Wildlife officials tracked the sow and her cubs, but determined that the bear had acted defensively and posed no ongoing threat to visitors who maintained proper distance. Margaret's family released a statement acknowledging the tragedy and expressing hope that others would heed safety warnings. It was May 22, 2017, along a narrow game trail skirting the riverine gallery forest in the northern Pantanal of Mato Grosso, Brazil. The low water season had concentrated wildlife along the shrinking channels, turning the river edges into hunting grounds for the region's apex predators. Dappled sunlight filtered through the canopy, illuminating patches of mud marked with fresh tracks. Capybaras grazed nervously near reed beds, and a caiman surfaced briefly before submerging again. The air was thick with humidity and the calls of distant birds. The trail itself was barely wide enough for single-file walking, winding between towering trees, whose roots created natural barriers along the riverbank. Lorraine Foster, a 34-year-old wildlife photographer from Canada, had joined a small expedition led by Paulo, a 52-year-old guide with decades of experience navigating the Pantanal's dangers. Paulo was disciplined and observant, known for his ability to read animal behavior and keep his clients safe. That morning, he had noted fresh jaguar prints along the trail, large and deep, indicating a sizable male moving parallel to the river. The prints were less than an hour old, still sharp in the damp soil. He urged the group to stay together and avoid approaching the water's edge. Nina, a 29-year-old photographer traveling with Lorraine, kept to the protocol, maintaining her position within the group. A boat pilot in his late 40s waited at a bend downstream, growing impatient as the morning wore on. The time pressure nudged Lorraine to hurry, and when she spotted a capybara near the reeds, she made a decision that would prove fatal. Paulo had warned specifically about separating from the group in areas with fresh jaguar sign, noting that the cats often used the dense vegetation as ambush points. Lorraine stepped off the trail, moving closer to frame the shot. She knelt in the soft earth, her back to a wall of dense vegetation. The rest of the group continued ahead, their voices fading. Paulo called back, reminding her to rejoin them, but she waved him off, focused on her camera. The capybara she was photographing suddenly froze, its ears swiveling backward. Jaguars are the largest cats in the Americas, with males weighing between 200 and 265 pounds. Unlike other big cats that suffocate their prey, jaguars possess the strongest bite force relative to body size of any feline, capable of crushing skulls and piercing turtle shells. They are solitary ambush predators, relying on stealth and explosive power to close short distances. Their preferred method of killing involves a precise bite to the back of the neck or the base of the skull, severing the spinal cord or penetrating the brain. In the Pantanal, where prey is abundant during the dry season, jaguars patrol riverbanks and forest edges, often remaining motionless for hours before striking. The reeds behind Lorraine shifted. The jaguar burst from cover in 2 powerful bounds, closing the gap before she could react. Its jaws clamped onto the upper portion of her neck from behind, teeth sinking deep into the soft tissue. The bite was immediate and precise, targeting the cervical vertebrae. The force of the attack drove her forward onto her hands and knees, her camera tumbling into the mud. The jaguar maintained its grip, applying sustained pressure. Its canines penetrated between the vertebrae, compressing the spinal cord and cutting off nerve signals to the rest of her body. Lorraine's arms gave out, and she collapsed onto her side. The jaguar adjusted its hold, repositioning slightly to ensure maximum control. Blood seeped from the puncture wounds, pooling beneath her. The cat began to drag her toward the water's edge, its powerful neck and shoulder muscles pulling her weight with ease. Her legs scraped over roots and stones, leaving a trail in the dirt. The jaguar paused at the shallows, releasing briefly to gain a better grip. It bit down again, this time higher on the neck, and pulled her partially into the water. The shallow current lapped around her torso. The jaguar held the bite for several minutes, its breathing steady and controlled. Lorraine's movements had ceased entirely. The combination of cervical trauma, spinal cord compression, and asphyxiation from the sustained neck hold had ended her life. The jaguar eventually released her and began dragging her toward thicker cover along the bank, instinctively moving its kill away from open areas. Paolo realized Lorraine had not rejoined the group and retraced his steps. He found the disturbed vegetation and the drag marks leading toward the water. He shouted for the others and radioed the boat pilot. Authorities were contacted, but recovery efforts were delayed due to the remote location and the presence of the jaguar nearby. Wildlife officials arrived the following day and located Lorraine's body partially concealed in dense undergrowth. The jaguar had abandoned the site. An investigation confirmed the attack was predatory in nature, likely triggered by her isolated position and proximity to the animal's hunting corridor. Her family issued a statement expressing their loss and emphasizing the importance of following guide instructions in wilderness areas. Local authorities implemented new protocols requiring photographers to remain within arm's reach of their guides in known jaguar territories. It was January 18, 2016, near a small island group off South Australia's Eyre Peninsula. The waters around the islands are renowned for their population of great white sharks, drawing licensed operators who offer cage diving experiences under strict safety protocols. The sea was choppy that morning, with moderate visibility and long surface glare reflecting off the swells. A private vessel had anchored outside the designated operator zone, its owner eager to capture footage without the expense and restrictions of a licensed tour. The boat rocked gently as gulls circled overhead, drawn by the scent of chum being ladled into the water. Chad Morrison, a 29-year-old videographer from Melbourne, had been invited aboard by Ben, a 33-year-old boat owner known for his brash attitude and willingness to cut corners. Ben had pushed for closer footage, dismissing the need for permits or proper safety equipment. A cage sat unused on the deck, deemed too cumbersome for the kind of shots Ben wanted. Rhea, a 27-year-old deckhand with limited experience, had reminded them multiple times about the permit requirements and the dangers of entering the water without protection. Her cautious warnings went unheeded. A licensed operator on a nearby vessel had even radioed a warning, urging them to exit the water immediately and cease chumming. The ignored radio call foreshadowed the investigative approach that great whites are known for when stimulated by scent and movement. Chad, however, was determined to get his footage. He entered the water on a trailing line, his fins dangling near the surface as the chum slick drifted away from the transom. Great white sharks are the ocean's most formidable apex predators, reaching lengths of up to 20 feet and weighing over 2 tons. They possess rows of serrated teeth designed to tear through flesh and bone, and their bite force can exceed 1.8 tons per square inch. Great whites rely on a combination of electroreception, acute smell, and vision to locate prey. When investigating potential food sources, they often perform exploratory bites to assess whether the target is worth consuming. Their hunting strategy involves approaching from below and behind, using the contrast between the dark depths and the bright surface to remain undetected until the final moment. threat. In areas with active chumming, their behavior becomes bolder and more investigative. The chum's slick spread across the surface, a dark, oily trail that attracted several sharks to the area. Chad floated near the line, adjusting his position as his legs scissored rhythmically to maintain stability. Below him, a large shape passed through the shimmer of refracted light, its silhouette unmistakable. The shark circled wider, then turned back toward the transom. It approached from below and behind, accelerating in a smooth upward glide. The shark bumped Chad's fin lightly with its snout, a tactile investigation. It veered away, circling at a distance of roughly 33 feet. Chad repositioned on the line, unaware of how close the animal had come. His legs continued their scissor motion, the movement creating vibrations that traveled through the water. The shark accelerated again, this time committing to a full strike. Its jaws opened wide as it surged upward, clamping down across Chad's right thigh and hip. The teeth sank deep, puncturing the femoral artery and crushing muscle tissue. The force of the bite carried him several meters through the water before the shark released. Blood erupted into the surrounding water in thick clouds, spreading rapidly. Chad's body went limp, his arms floating outward. The shark circled back, its movements deliberate and unhurried. It approached again from below, this time targeting the lower torso and upper left leg. The shark veered away, disappearing momentarily into deeper water. Moments later, it passed again beneath Chad, drawn by the blood and the vibrations of his flailing fins, a typical investigative pattern rather than a deliberate second strike. The second bite was equally devastating, teeth tearing through the pelvic region and severing additional major blood vessels. The shark shook its head briefly, a lateral motion that widened the wounds and caused further tissue damage. The animal released again and veered off into deeper water, disappearing from view. Chad floated near the surface, the line still attached to his harness. Ben and Rhea shouted from the deck, scrambling to haul him toward the platform. The water around him was dark with blood. By the time they pulled him onto the swim platform, he had lost consciousness. The injuries were catastrophic. The femoral artery had been completely severed, and the pelvic trauma had caused massive internal hemorrhaging. Despite attempts to apply pressure and control the bleeding, the blood loss was too rapid and too extensive. Chad Morrison died within minutes, his body unable to sustain the damage inflicted by the shark's powerful jaws. Authorities launched an immediate investigation into the incident. The private vessel was found to be operating without the required permits, and the use of chum outside designated zones was cited as a contributing factor. Ben faced potential charges for negligence and violation of marine safety regulations. Chad's family released a brief statement expressing their grief and calling for stricter enforcement of shark diving regulations. The incident reignited debates over unregulated shark tourism and the risks posed by individuals who prioritize spectacle over safety. Marine biologists noted that the shark's behavior was consistent with investigative bites triggered by chum and surface activity, emphasizing that great whites do not typically target humans as prey, but will investigate unfamiliar stimuli in their environment. It was August 9th, 2016, along the forest edge near Bwindi Impenetrable National Park in southwestern Uganda. The area where dense montane forest meets community farmland has long been a zone of tension, with habituated guerrilla troops occasionally venturing out to forage on crops. Soft morning light filtered through the tall trees, illuminating the understory where a troop of mountain gorillas fed quietly on vegetation. The air was cool and still, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and decaying leaves. Rose Carter, a 45-year-old charity volunteer from England, had arrived in Uganda 2 weeks earlier to work with a rural development organization. She had expressed interest in seeing the gorillas and was connected with Cato, a 36-year-old unlicensed guide who offered off-trail viewings at a fraction of the cost of official permits. Cato was opportunistic and evasive, dismissing concerns about safety and protocol in favor of profit. He led Rose and a small group, including Miriam, a 43-year-old charity volunteer who was conscientious and rule-minded, along an unmarked path that skirted the park boundary. Miriam repeatedly urged the group to maintain distance and follow established guidelines, but Cato waved off her concerns. A local farmer in his 50s, working a nearby field, noticed the group and warned them about recent unpredictable behavior from the troop, particularly the dominant silverback. His warning foreshadowed the defensive response that territorial males animals are known to exhibit when challenged. The troop fed peacefully in the understory, the silverback positioned about 10 feet behind a sapling, his massive frame partially obscured by foliage. Cato instructed the group to stay back, but did not enforce the distance. Rose, captivated by the proximity of the animals, stepped ahead of the others. She raised her arms and thumped her chest twice in imitation of the display behavior she had seen in documentaries. The sound echoed through the quiet forest. Mountain gorillas are the largest living primates, with adult males, known as silverbacks, weighing between 300 to 485 pounds. Despite their herbivorous diet, they possess immense physical strength, with arm and jaw power capable of inflicting severe trauma. Silverbacks are responsible for protecting their troop, and they interpret certain behaviors, such as direct eye contact, loud vocalizations, or chest beating, as challenges to their authority. When threatened, a silverback may perform a bluff charge, but if the perceived threat persists, the charge can transition into a full physical assault. Their canines can deliver crushing bites, and their powerful limbs can generate blunt force trauma sufficient to break bones and rupture internal organs. The silverback rose to his full height, his eyes locked on Rose. He dropped to all fours and charged in a direct line, covering the distance in seconds. Rose stumbled backward, her foot catching on a root. She fell as the silverback reached her. He struck first with both hands, a powerful two-handed shove that sent her sprawling onto uneven ground. Her head struck a protruding stone, and her vision blurred. The silverback stood over her, his breath audible, and delivered a forceful bite to her left shoulder. His canines punctured through the fabric of her shirt and into the muscle beneath, crushing the clavicle and tearing tissue. Blood soaked into her clothing. He pressed down with his full body weight, pinning her to the ground. Rose's right arm flailed weakly, but the silverback ignored it. He shifted position and struck her chest with his forearm, a downward blow that fractured multiple ribs. The force of the impact compressed her lungs and caused immediate internal bleeding. She gasped, unable to draw a full breath. The silverback grabbed her by the torso and lifted her slightly before tossing her a short distance. She landed on her side, her body limp. He stood upright again, beating his chest in a display directed at the other humans, who had scattered and were shouting from a safer distance. He returned to Rose and delivered another blow to her midsection, his fist driving into her abdomen with enough force to rupture her spleen and liver. He returned to Rose and delivered one final shove, knocking her onto her side. The impact caused severe internal trauma, including ruptured organs. Then, as suddenly as it began, the attack ended. The silverback retreating once the perceived threat was no longer moving. Satisfied that the threat had been neutralized, the silverback turned and moved back toward his troop. He vocalized once, a low rumble, and began herding the other gorillas deeper into the forest. Rose lay motionless on the forest floor, her injuries catastrophic. The combination of blunt force trauma to the chest and abdomen, along with massive internal hemorrhaging, had caused her cardiovascular system to collapse. She died within minutes. Cato and Miriam approached cautiously once the troop had moved away. Cato radioed for help, but the remote location meant that assistance would take hours to arrive. By the time park rangers and medical personnel reached the site, Rose had been dead for over an hour. An investigation was launched into the circumstances of the encounter. Cato was found to be operating without proper authorization, and his dismissal of safety protocols was cited as a primary factor in the tragedy. Rose's family released a statement expressing their sorrow and calling for greater regulation of gorilla tourism. Conservation organizations emphasized that mountain gorillas are wild animals and that approaching them outside of sanctioned visits poses significant risks.
It was March 15th, 2019, in Kalispell, Montana, as residents hurried to stock up before a forecasted snowstorm moved in. The Mountain View supermarket had become a vital stop that morning, crowded with shoppers preparing to be snowed in for days once the weather worsened. Roxanne Mitchell, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher known for her methodical nature, had ventured out that Saturday morning despite weather warnings. She needed groceries for the week ahead, knowing that once the storm hit full force, she would be snowed in at her cabin for days. Her routine was predictable: arrive early, grab a cart, and systematically work through her shopping list while listening to podcasts through earbuds. Meanwhile, on the same treacherous highway, an illegal exotic animal owner was transporting his prized possession to a remote mountain property. The modified van struggled against icy conditions, as the driver grew increasingly reckless. Inside a hastily constructed cage, a roughly 120-pound adult cougar named Rex paced nervously, sensing danger through the vehicle's erratic movements. Cougars are North America's second-largest wild cats, capable of vertical leaps of 18 feet and running speeds up to 50 miles per hour. These solitary predators possess retractable claws up to 4 inches long and canine teeth designed to deliver crushing bites to the throat and windpipe. When attacking, cougars aim for the neck, using powerful jaws to crush the windpipe and suffocate prey rather than relying on blood loss. The collision occurred when the van hit black ice and slammed into a light pole in the supermarket parking lot. The impact rattled the flimsy cage, loosening its weak latch. Rex shoved until the warped door gave way, stumbling into the cold with cuts along his flank. He bolted toward the nearby forest, but the highway blocked his escape. Panicked, he turned back and slipped through a loading dock door left ajar by a delivery driver. Inside, Roxanne methodically selected produce, her earbuds blocking ambient noise. She remained unaware of the chaos in the parking lot or approaching danger. The cougar slipped through the loading area into the back storage room, seeking darkness to hide and assess his injuries. The overwhelming food sense and unfamiliar environment kept him on high alert. The cougar crouched in the dark of the storage room, pacing and bleeding, but the noise and bright lights drove him into panic. Startled by the clatter of carts and voices, he bolted into the main store in a desperate attempt to find a way out. Shoppers screamed at the sudden sight of the animal, abandoning carts and rushing for the exits. But Roxanne, absorbed in shopping with earbuds in, remained completely unaware of the pandemonium. The cougar, desperate to escape the chaos, spotted movement in the produce section where Roxanne stood alone. When she finally looked up and saw the massive cat less than 10 feet away, she froze in terror, her shopping list falling from trembling hands. The cornered and panicked cougar interpreted her stillness as a threat. The cougar launched forward with explosive power, his 120-pound frame striking Roxanne in the chest and knocking her backward into an apple display. As she fell, his claws raked across her arms and chest, tearing through her jacket and inflicting deep lacerations. She hit the floor hard among scattered fruit. The cougar immediately clamped his jaws around her throat, his canine teeth penetrating deep tissue. His bite was instinctively precise, crushing her windpipe and cutting off her air supply. The pressure compressed Roxanne's trachea and damaged delicate neck structures. She struggled briefly, but the crushing pressure prevented breathing or calling for help. The attack lasted only seconds before alarms and fleeing shoppers sent Rex bolting through an emergency exit. He vanished into the storm outside, leaving chaos behind. Roxanne lay gasping through her damaged windpipe. The combination of crushed throat structures, severe lacerations, and internal bleeding proved catastrophic. Store employees rushed to help, but the airway damage was too severe. She lost consciousness within minutes, and despite frantic efforts by employees, the airway damage was unsurvivable. Paramedics, delayed by storm-blocked roads, could only confirm what had already happened. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the Montana community. The supermarket closed as investigators pieced together events. The cougar's owner faced multiple felony charges for illegal possession of a dangerous animal. The incident sparked statewide discussions about private exotic animal ownership dangers. It was August 22, 2020, when the Howard family gathered at their rural property outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, for a small weekend dinner. The 40-acre homestead, surrounded by rolling hills and oak forests, provided ideal isolation for Robert Howard's unusual hobby. He was legally permitted to own exotic animals, including his 8-year-old male chimpanzee named Caesar. Celeste Howard, a 29-year-old pediatric nurse from Oklahoma City, had driven 2 hours to visit her brother-in-law's family. Known for her firm approach with children at the hospital, Celeste possessed calm authority that made her excellent at her job. However, she had always felt uncomfortable around Caesar, despite Robert's assurances that the chimpanzee was harmless. Her medical background made her aware of potential dangers, and she had privately expressed concerns about the animal's presence around family. Robert had owned Caesar since the chimp was 18 months old, acquiring him before regulations tightened. The animal had grown up on the property but was showing increasing territorial behavior as he approached sexual maturity. Caesar lived in a large outdoor enclosure, but was occasionally allowed brief supervised visits inside during special occasions. Robert believed his years of raising Caesar had created a strong bond, though he had noticed the chimp becoming more possessive around food recently. The evening started quietly with immediate family gathering for dinner. Caesar had been brought inside for a brief visit under strict supervision. The chimpanzee sat in a corner, occasionally receiving treats from Robert's hand. However, the animal displayed subtle agitation signs throughout the evening, pacing, vocalizing, and showing teeth when family members moved quickly. Chimpanzees are humanity's closest living relatives, sharing 98.8% of our DNA, but this similarity masks their incredible physical power and unpredictable nature. Adult male chimps can weigh 120 to 170 pounds and possess strength 5 to 7 times greater than humans. Their arms are significantly longer and more muscular, with hands capable of exerting crushing grip strength. Chimpanzees have large, sharp canine teeth over an inch long, designed for defense and establishing dominance. As chimps reach sexual maturity around age 8 to 10, they become increasingly territorial and unpredictable. When agitated, chimpanzees typically target vulnerable areas, hands, face, and feet, using a powerful grip and sharp teeth. The fatal sequence began when Caesar, weighing 130 pounds, approached the dinner table and grabbed food from Celeste's plate. This behavior had occurred before, but Celeste's nursing instincts kicked in, and she firmly said no, while gently pushing his hand away. This direct physical contact and challenge to Caesar's perceived dominance triggered an explosive response. Caesar immediately grabbed Celeste's right hand in his powerful grip, his fingers wrapping around her wrist with tremendous force. The pressure was overwhelming as the chimp's strength exceeded human capability. Before anyone could react, Caesar's canine teeth sank into Celeste's hand, puncturing through skin and muscle while his grip prevented escape. As Celeste cried out and tried to pull away, Caesar's attack intensified. His teeth tore into her hand and fingers, causing severe lacerations and crushing injuries to delicate bones. The chimp's free hand grabbed her other arm, maintaining control while he continued biting her right hand. Blood flowed as Caesar's teeth damaged tendons, nerves, and blood vessels. When Celeste fell backward, Caesar followed her to the floor, shifting his attack to her face. His powerful hands pinned her head, while his teeth shredded soft tissue around her nose and eyes. Robert and his wife immediately intervened, shouting and grabbing at Caesar, but the animal's focused aggression and superior strength made stopping the attack difficult. Robert grabbed a wooden chair and struck Caesar, finally causing the animal to release Celeste and retreat. The entire attack lasted approximately 45 seconds, but the damage was catastrophic. Celeste suffered severe trauma to her right hand, with multiple fractures and deep lacerations severing important tendons and blood vessels. Facial injuries were extensive, including catastrophic damage to her nose and eyes. The combination of severe blood loss, shock from trauma, and potential airway compromise from facial swelling created a life-threatening emergency. Robert immediately called 911 while his wife attempted to control the bleeding with towels. However, the remote rural location meant emergency responders faced a significant delay. Despite frantic first aid efforts, Celeste's condition deteriorated rapidly due to blood loss and shock. She lost consciousness within minutes and died from her injuries before paramedics could arrive. The attack prompted immediate investigation by Oklahoma wildlife officials and law enforcement. Caesar was quarantined and later euthanized after a behavioral assessment confirmed his dangerous nature. Robert faced scrutiny over his permits and handling, though loopholes in Oklahoma law meant no charges were filed. The incident sparked renewed debate about private ownership of dangerous animals and highlighted risks even experienced handlers face with mature chimpanzees. It was November 8, 2021, when Malcolm Green made his final descent into the converted garage that had become his dangerous secret. The modest home in rural Montana sat on 20 acres of heavily wooded land, providing perfect cover for Malcolm's risky hobby. The property was isolated enough that neighbors rarely visited, and the thick forest helped muffle unusual sounds from the reinforced garage. Malcolm Green, a 41-year-old construction foreman, had always been drawn to dangerous situations and exotic animals. His co-workers knew him as a man who took unnecessary risks, often bragging about his fearlessness. This reckless confidence had led him to acquire a young black bear cub 2 years earlier through questionable channels, taking advantage of Montana's lenient exotic animal regulations. Malcolm had convinced himself that raising Bruno from a young age would create an unbreakable bond. He had spent considerable money converting his garage into what he believed was a suitable enclosure, reinforcing walls, and installing heavy-duty locks. The garage had become Bruno's entire world, a cramped space that bore no resemblance to the vast wilderness where black bears naturally roam. Malcolm's friends had warned him about the growing danger, but his stubborn personality made him dismiss their concerns. Over recent months, Bruno had been displaying increasingly troubling behaviors that Malcolm either ignored or misinterpreted. The bear had begun pacing obsessively, leaving scratches on concrete walls and showing aggressive posturing whenever Malcolm entered. Food aggression had become particularly pronounced, with Bruno growling during feeding times. These were clear warning signs of severe psychological stress, but Malcolm's overconfidence blinded him to the escalating threat. The evening of November 8th followed Malcolm's typical routine. He had returned from work, grabbed Bruno's evening meal, and prepared to enter the garage as he had done many times before. However, Bruno had been displaying heightened agitation all week, and the confined animal's stress levels had reached a breaking point. Black bears typically weigh 125 to 400 pounds when fully grown and possess incredible strength and agility. They can run up to 35 miles per hour and have powerful claws up to 4 inches long. Their jaws exert approximately 400 to 600 pounds per square inch of pressure, easily crushing bones. When cornered or stressed, they become extremely dangerous. Captive bears in inadequate conditions often develop severe behavioral problems, including increased aggression. Malcolm descended into the garage, carrying Bruno's evening meal in a metal bucket. The 160-pound bear had been pacing restlessly, his massive frame moving in repetitive patterns. The animal's eyes locked onto the food bucket, but his body language displayed clear agitation rather than normal hunger. Bruno's ears were pinned back, and he was making low growling sounds. As Malcolm approached the feeding area, Bruno's behavior escalated dramatically. The bear rose up on its hind legs, looming over 6 feet tall, and began making aggressive vocalizations. Malcolm, confident in his routine and dismissive of warning signs, continued forward with the food bucket. This was the fatal mistake, entering the confined space of a highly stressed, territorial bear during feeding time. Bruno dropped to all fours and struck with explosive force. His 160-pound frame hit Malcolm like a battering ram, immediately knocking him against the concrete wall. The impact broke several ribs and caused severe internal injuries. The metal food bucket flew from his hands, scattering meat across the garage floor. The bear's attack focused on eliminating the perceived threat. Bruno's massive front paws struck Malcolm repeatedly, each blow delivering crushing force that fractured bones and caused internal bleeding. The bear's 4-inch claws raked across Malcolm's chest and arms, tearing through clothing and flesh. Malcolm's attempts to protect himself were futile against the animal's overwhelming strength. Bruno then clamped his powerful jaws around Malcolm's head and neck area, his teeth penetrating deep into the skull and cervical spine. The bear's bite force immediately crushed skull bones and severed critical blood vessels. The damage to his brain and spinal cord was instantaneous, causing immediate loss of consciousness and motor function. The attack continued for approximately 2 minutes as Bruno delivered devastating injuries to Malcolm's chest and head. Malcolm died from severe head trauma, spinal cord injury, and massive blood loss within the first minute of the attack, though Bruno continued until his aggression subsided. Malcolm's body was discovered 3 days later when his construction crew supervisor came to check on his absence from work. The scene shocked local law enforcement and wildlife officials, who immediately secured the area. Wildlife officers euthanized Bruno on site, citing the danger he posed to responders. The incident prompted an investigation by Montana wildlife authorities and highlighted the extreme dangers of keeping large predators in inadequate conditions. Malcolm's family struggled to understand how his fascination with dangerous animals had led to his violent death in the garage he believed would keep him safe. It was July 4th, 2022, when Dean Harrington's 4th of July celebration turned deadly at his rural Louisiana property outside Baton Rouge. The 5-acre homestead featured a custom-built pond system housing Dean's prized possession, a 5-foot American alligator named Gator. Dean had pursued this exotic hobby legally for 4 years with proper state permits and liability insurance. Dean Harrington, a 38-year-old insurance salesman, was known for his competitive nature and need to impress others with dangerous stunts. His personality was driven by a constant need to prove his fearlessness, traits that had led him to make increasingly poor decisions regarding his exotic pet. The custom pond featured deep and shallow sections, with Dean sparing no expense on filtration systems and heating elements. He had acquired Gator legally and maintained all permits, often boasting about his responsible approach to exotic animal ownership. However, responsible paperwork couldn't compensate for reckless behavior around the dangerous predator. The pond reached 8 feet in the deep section, with carefully maintained water chemistry. The party had been ongoing for hours, with Dean drinking steadily throughout the day. His judgment became increasingly impaired as the celebration continued. The combination of alcohol, his competitive personality, and an audience created perfect conditions for disaster. Dean had been telling guests about his special relationship with Gator, claiming he had developed a bond that made him immune to danger. As the evening progressed, Dean noticed his pond's filter making unusual noises, indicating a potential clog. His perfectionist nature drove him to address the problem immediately, despite his intoxicated state. The issue required entering deeper water to access the filter housing, something Dean had done before during maintenance, but never while drunk or with Gator present. American alligators are apex predators unchanged for millions of years. Adult alligators can grow up to 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds, though Dean's 5-foot specimen still weighed approximately 70 pounds. Even at that size, Gator's jaws carried crushing strength, more than enough to break bone. Their teeth are designed for gripping prey, with new teeth constantly replacing old ones. Alligators are ambush predators that can remain motionless before exploding into action. When attacking, they employ the death roll, spinning while maintaining grip to disorient and drown victims. Dean waded into chest-deep water carrying tools to fix the filter. The warm evening made the water temperature perfect for Gator's activity, and the reptile had been lurking in deeper sections throughout the party. Dean's impaired judgment led him to dismiss obvious danger, convinced his ownership experience had created a protective bond. Gator had been monitoring Dean's movements from murky depths, processing vibrations in the water. As Dean bent to reach the submerged filter, he presented a perfect target for ambush. The alligator struck with explosive speed, powerful jaws clamping down on Dean's right thigh above the knee. The bite sank deep into muscle, and as the death roll began, the twisting force snapped his thigh bone and tore through major blood vessels. The grip was unbreakable, teeth designed to hold struggling prey. Dean's screams echoed across the property as the reality of his situation set in. Gator spun violently, his body twisting while maintaining a crushing grip on Dean's leg. The rotational force dragged him deeper, disoriented him, and prevented any chance of escape. The snap of the femur and the severing of the femoral artery caused catastrophic blood loss that quickly turned the pond water red. The roll also forced Dean's head under, starting the drowning process. The combination of massive blood loss and water intake created a rapidly fatal situation. His struggles weakened within moments as oxygen deprivation and shock set in. After 2 complete rotations, resistance from prey ceased. Dean had lost consciousness from massive blood loss and drowning. Gator maintained grip briefly before releasing the body and retreating to deeper water. Party guests heard Dean's screams, but couldn't see clearly into the dark pond water. By the time they realized what had happened and called emergency services, Dean had already died from blood loss and drowning. His body was recovered within an hour by animal control officers who first secured Gator. The incident prompted an investigation by Louisiana wildlife officials. Dean's permits were in order, but the case highlighted how legal ownership couldn't prevent tragedy when alcohol and poor judgment were involved. Gator was euthanized following standard protocol for alligators involved in fatal attacks. It was January 12, 2018, when Oscar Whitman made his final visit to his uncle's exotic animal facility in rural Texas. The Whitman Wildlife Rescue operated on 25 acres, housing 12 rescued big cats under USDA and Texas Parks licenses. The facility had maintained a good safety record over 8 years, though there had been 2 minor staff injuries previously. Oscar Whitman, a 26-year-old veterinary student at Texas A&M University, was known for his academic excellence and confident approach to animal behavior. His classroom success had created overconfidence in assessing animal behavior in real situations. Oscar had been spending winter break observing operations, eager to gain experience for his veterinary education. Robert Whitman had operated the rescue for 8 years, building a solid reputation among wildlife authorities. Safety protocols required 2-person teams for all big cat feeding and maintenance. Robert had rescued Luna, a female cougar, 18 months earlier when she was 2 years old. Despite being captive-raised, Luna retained wild instincts and showed stress behaviors since reaching sexual maturity. Oscar had been observing daily routines, always remaining outside enclosures while his uncle worked. Facility rules were clear. Visitors never entered big cat areas, feeding required extra caution, and aggressive behavior meant immediate withdrawal. However, Oscar's veterinary training made him frustrated with overly restrictive policies preventing hands-on learning. The evening had started routinely, with Oscar observing as Robert prepared meals. Luna had been displaying stress behaviors, increased pacing, vocalizing during feeding, and heightened alertness. Robert had consulted the facility veterinarian about these changes, considered normal for a maturing female cougar. When Robert stepped away to retrieve meat from the freezer, Oscar impulsively decided to enter Luna's enclosure to place her food bowl closer to her preferred spot. His veterinary education gave him confidence in reading animal behavior, believing the simple task posed minimal risk. This momentary lapse would prove fatal. Cougars are the most widespread wildcat in the Americas, ranging from Canada to South America, and thrive in habitats from deserts to dense forests. Unlike lions or wolves, they hunt entirely alone, relying on stealth and explosive ambush rather than group tactics. Their large hind paws allow them to spring with surprising silence, and padded feet make their approach nearly undetectable. Adult females like Luna typically weigh 75 to 120 pounds, but their muscular build gives them the ability to overpower prey several times their size. Cougars often drag kills into cover and may cache them under leaves or debris, returning to feed over several days. Even animals raised in captivity retain these instinctive behaviors, making them unpredictable and dangerous once they reach maturity. Oscar quietly entered Luna's enclosure carrying her food bowl, believing his calm approach would prevent startling the animal. The 90-pound female cougar immediately became alert to the intrusion. Luna's body language showed stress, ears back, tail twitching, muscles tensed. But Oscar misinterpreted these signals as curiosity. As Oscar approached the feeding area, Luna's predatory instincts activated. The cougar monitored his movements with focused intensity, processing every step as potential threat to her territory. When Oscar bent down to place the bowl, he presented perfect opportunity for ambush attack. Luna struck with explosive power, launching herself in a single bound. Her 90-pound frame struck Oscar in the back with devastating force, immediately knocking him face down and positioning herself for a killing bite. The impact drove Oscar to the ground, stunning him and preventing effective defense. The cougar's claws extended fully as she landed, sharp talons penetrating deep into Oscar's shoulders and back to maintain grip. Pain was immediate as Luna's claws raked across his shoulder blades, tearing through jacket and flesh. Oscar's attempts to roll over were futile against the cougar's superior positioning. Luna's killing instincts directed her to Oscar's neck, the most vulnerable target for quick incapacitation. Her powerful jaws clamped down on the back of his neck with crushing force, canine teeth penetrating deep into the cervical area. The bite targeted the base of his skull and upper neck vertebrae, following evolutionary programming that made cougars efficient killers. The damage to Oscar's neck was severe and immediate. Luna's bite crushed vertebrae and damaged the spinal cord, while her teeth punctured major blood vessels. The trauma caused rapid loss of motor function and consciousness. Oscar's body went limp as spinal injury eliminated his ability to move or call for help. Luna maintained her grip for approximately 1 minute, ensuring complete subdual. The cougar's jaw pressure continued, causing additional damage to compromised vertebrae and blood vessels. Oscar lost consciousness quickly from spinal trauma and blood loss, his vital systems shutting down from catastrophic injuries. Robert returned to find Oscar motionless with Luna standing over him. The cougar immediately retreated when Robert appeared, allowing him to call emergency services. However, Oscar had already died from massive spinal cord trauma and blood loss. The incident prompted immediate investigation by USDA and Texas Parks officials. The facility's licenses were suspended, and Robert faced potential criminal charges for allowing unauthorized entry. Luna was euthanized following standard protocol for big cats involved in fatal attacks. The case highlighted how brief lapses in safety protocols could have deadly consequences. Oscar's family and veterinary community mourned the loss of a promising student whose momentary overconfidence cost him his life. Oscar Whitman's tragedy demonstrated that wild animals retain lethal instincts regardless of captivity, and academic knowledge cannot replace respect for safety protocols.
Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.